I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd ask you to remain standing for just a minute. Unfortunately, this week we lost a student, Dylan Levesque. So if we could just have a brief moment of silence for Dylan, and hoping the best for his family. So thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. With that, we're going to start with recognition.
Okay, I'd like to call Heather Tucker to the table so we can celebrate some students at the John T. Nichols Middle School this evening who participated in a program called IXL. This is a math platform that asks students to complete math equations, math problems, and it's something that they do and they complete in their own time. It's something they have used school time to complete, and our students really did perform at a remarkable level. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Heather Tucker, our principal of the Nichols Middle School, to introduce our students and talk a little bit about their performance.
I am super excited to be here to be able to talk about our 6th grade Nichols Middle School students and one 7th grader. IXL is a math program that's used by more than 14 million students and more than 900,000 teachers, as well as at home by families worldwide. During the month of April, IXL runs a contest to see which classes can answer the most questions. Students have to follow a set of rules in order for the questions to count. There are 3 categories for the April contest: pre-K to 4th grade, 5th to 8th grade, and 9th to 12th grade. Over 43,000 classes registered to participate. Including all 3 categories, Team USA was first in Massachusetts, 13th in the United States, and 22nd in the world for the highest average of questions per student. That right there. So our Team USA consisted of 13 6th graders and one 7th grader who were registered into the 5th to 8th grade category by Mr. Michael Lapino, who is a 6th grade math teacher. In this category, Team USA was first in Massachusetts. Oh, I read that again. Sorry. Our 14 members of this Team USA answered questions in class, during homeroom, at lunch, at home, during April vacation, and on the weekends. Their achievement during this contest is even more impressive considering they had 2 days of MCAS during April. That's something that not all states have, and countries do not have April vacation. So I am going to announce the awards. So when I say your name, I'm going to hand you your award. Okay? All right. Very first, we have Grace Axton. She's not here. Okay. Samantha America. Nice job. Penelope Berard. Thank you. Jadis Carlton. Molly Drevich. Not here. Jalen Golf. Yay. We have Vincent Graca. Okay. Ella McCauley. No. Brianna Perkins. Nice job, Brianna. Emily Plant. Rose Price. Anthony Spacone.
Not here.
Okay. Good. Sophia Trizzi. Thank you, Sophia. Morgan Tripp.
Not here.
Not here. We have an award that we will be hanging in our school building. I wanted to let you know that Team Perkins was led by, Team USA was led by Brianna Perkins, Morgan Tripp, and Anthony Spacone, who answered over 10,000 questions each. Wow. And as a little extra, we're going to do a Tucker Time Fun Time on Tuesday during extension block to celebrate all of our students. So Another big round of applause. We're so proud of you. Okay.
Sure. Come on up, guys. Thank you, guys. We appreciate all your hard work. Number 2.
Next, I wanted to recognize 2 of our administrative team members this week who presented to the Massachusetts Association of School Business Officials. Anytime members of our team are presenting across the state, not only does it reflect positively on the Middleborough Public Schools, but it's showing you the depth of skill that the administrative team possesses. Director of Business and Finance, Sarah Hickey, and Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Terry Markolitis, presented to this group, as I said, with members across the state this week on 2 distinct topics. Ms. Hickey presented on how school business managers can use assessment data more effectively, and Dr. Markolitis presented to the whole group on the drafting of what's called SMART goals in terms of performance. So I wanted to congratulate both of them, and if you would just stand for a minute so we can applaud. And the last item I wanted to recognize this evening involves one of our school resource officers, who is part of the Middleborough Police Department, Officer Scott Phillips. He was recently awarded the Exceptional Service Award for 2023 by the Massachusetts Juvenile Police Officers Association. As I said, he is a school resource officer. Officer Phillips is one of our SROs, and he serves at the Nichols Middle School and also at other schools as needed, including the Berkland Elementary School. Massachusetts Juvenile Police Officers Association has been in existence for over 50 years. MJPOA is a combination of hardworking and dedicated school resource officers, juvenile officers, DARE officers, detectives, supervisors, youth officers, probation officers, principals, assistant principals, teachers, counselors, and school safety security personnel all working together. This group provides information and training for law enforcement personnel and school personnel, keeping our members up to date on juvenile issues, school issues, and recent court decisions. So I wanted to just recognize Officer Scott Phillips this evening, thank him for his continued service, and offer him also a round of applause.
Anything else, my friend?
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. As we said last time, any person who wishes to speak in public comment will have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm here to speak regarding the lawsuit brought against the town and the school committee, as well as 2 employees of the district. It is the duty of the superintendent and employee of the school committee, not their boss, to make decisions that are not based on personal feelings, rather what is best for the district and the students of Middleborough as a whole. Last meeting, I put a call to action to Superintendent Lyons, asking her to make the change, offer opportunities for conversation. This was missed yet again, and here we are, standing in the face of a lawsuit that was avoidable. Personal feelings aside, You had an opportunity to effectively bring together students and families who were either offended or hurt by the shirt worn by another student. Your response has been to stand your ground and refuse to have the conversation. The chair also missed an opportunity to seek counsel and allow the board to have a conversation regarding their opinions on this matter. By refusing this, he has put this district at risk. Our children deserve leaders who speak for them and make decisions based on their best interests. For these reasons, I'm asking for the resignation of the superintendent and the chair. I no longer trust that either of you have our children's best interests in mind.
Anyone else wishes to speak? Thank you. Go right ahead.
Excuse me. Good evening. I'm here this evening to just briefly give some praise and gratitude to Mrs. Tucker at the middle school. There was an incident with my son recently at the middle school, and I'm not going to talk about that at all. I respect the process and the privacy of all the parties involved. But it was something that we needed to discuss and have an open and transparent, clear conversation about the expectations for everyone involved, which we 100% received. It was impressive, it was reassuring, it was calming. Both my husband and I and our son were there. Mrs. Tucker spoke to my son directly. She asked him for his personal input. He responded honestly and openly. He felt heard, he felt validated, and he really truly felt like the resolution was something that he could accept, let go of the incident, and move forward with the remaining 20 days of the school year. In addition to that, Mrs. Tucker helped us identify some opportunities that are written into his 504 for when he moves up to the high school next year, which were things that we had not at the time even considered as, I don't want to say gaps, but opportunities to make sure that there was additional protections for him with the 504 that he does have in place. In the midst of the conversation that we had, it came to my attention that we really need to rally around the middle school right now, and I think that it's really important that parents, especially those of us who have students in the 8th grade, they have an opportunity in the last 20 days of school to really set the tone about what they want the middle school to be for them and for the 6th and 7th graders that are moving up in the incoming 6th grade, because I know that when they get up to the high school and they reach Mr. Brannigan, that this is going to be a whole new world for them. And I think that as parents, we should be encouraging our students that are in the 8th grade to really genuinely raise the bar for the students that will still be there as they come into September, because they need to pull together as well. We talk about it all the time. We have to have conversations. We have to be honest with each other. We have to work together. And I think that as parents, we should really be encouraging our students to do the same thing, and also to be mindful of the fact that as peers to the younger classes in the building, they're going to have a larger impact than anything that we can do or say at home. And it's a really awesome opportunity that's available to them. And I would highly encourage anyone that has not had the opportunity to speak to Mrs. Tucker, really to do so, because she's making me feel much better about the way that things are there for my 7th grader who will be rising to 8th grade. And it's encouraging. And I just wanted to say thank you to her and to you guys for bringing her in, because I think that she's needed and she's very much appreciated by our family. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to bring up something not on tonight's agenda? Please do. Welcome, sir. Can I ask that you just state your name for me?
James.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, members of the school committee, for listening to me. My name is James, and I am in the 5th grade. Next year, I'll be going to Nichols Middle School. My beautiful mom told me about Liam, how Liam was made to go home because of his shirt, saying that there are only 2 genders. No disrespect, but have you heard of the First Amendment? Do you know about freedom of speech? We can wear what we want as long as it's not racist, sexist, inappropriate, or offensive. This does not fit those restrictions. Liam has every right to share his opinion and beliefs. I am sure you guys are a good committee, but this is not right. When we lose our rights to debate or disagree, we will stop learning. When I don't want to feel like my opinions make me a bad person. We are told to be inclusive to everyone, but this is an example of how Nichols Middle School is not being inclusive to all people, regardless of their beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Anyone else? Mrs. Morrison, welcome.
Oh, Lord. I'm Melissa Morrison, and no, I didn't intend to do this, just like the last time. I didn't intend on coming. I was actually supporting a friend. I'm just a little disheartened because I feel like kids are being influenced by their parents and by people having them write notes and things about this. What they're not understanding, the kids are not understanding, is that it's a hate shirt. It's hatred toward other people who feel like their genders do not match who they are. And by them wearing them, they are hurting students. People of the LGBTQ, people like my son. I don't mind people wearing different shirts, but saying that this is the only way it is, it's a hateful shirt. You want to wear other things of your opinion, what your political party is, what your religion, I really don't care. But when you wear a shirt that's full of hate messages, and that's what it is, and if you think it doesn't cause pain, it causes pain. It causes pain to families. It causes pain to kids. Kids who are in middle school are very volatile, and their age, many of them do think about suicide and things like that, and people in the LGBT community are the transgender community has a lot of suicide. I hate to see that, especially in the middle school when they're so fragile. So I just want to say, in rebuttal to some of these things, I feel for these kids who feel their First Amendment is being violated, and it's good that they're going to stand up for themselves, but if it's not them and their parents are actually stating this is not okay. And I hope that there can be some sort of ground that we can meet on. I do think the school committee and the superintendent should come together. We have to have a conversation, because this is not going away. My son gets to go off to college. I'm like, go be who you're going to be. You don't have to deal with this. But his little sister is going to have to still deal with this at the high school. And actually, I have to tell you, the kids navigate this all by themselves. They don't need anybody here to help them. These kids are like, so what? You like a girl? You like a boy? I really don't care. They don't care. You know who cares? The adults care. I don't know why. They're doing this all by themselves. When I told my son about what was happening, and I went to hold his son, he goes, do whatever you want to do. I'm going to senior skip day. Shh, I didn't say that. He was being who he was supposed to be, a normal teenage boy. And that's what we want. We want to keep putting emphasis on this. I don't want to have to keep coming and standing up here. Just let them be kids. If they want to like who they like, they want to love who they want to love, who cares? Life is hard enough as it is. Let them be who they want to be. Girl, boy, whatever gender. And by the way, when we're talking about science, look it up. There's a fish that actually changes its gender halfway through its life cycle. So there's your science. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up.
Good evening. I'm here to comment about the violation of First Amendment rights that has happened at Nichols Middle School and the subsequent lawsuit that has now been filed against the town. With all due respect, Madam Superintendent, you are doing an enormous disservice to our students and community by not only violating this particular student's rights, but also potentially costing the taxpayers of our town a lot of money because of litigation. Our town of Middleborough that you do not live in. We need to keep laser point focus on the issue at hand, freedom of speech. We all have a right to it, and it's good for all of us. Freedom of speech brings opportunity to spark discussions and cause people to find out more about each other's differences. And isn't this one of the big issues of our current era, respecting everyone for who they are and what their differences are, even if you don't agree? These students are insulated in these buildings. Once they leave these four walls, they will experience what real life is. People do not have to agree with you or your opinion or feelings. These students will also hopefully realize that if someone doesn't agree with you, it doesn't mean they hate you or want you to do any harm to you in any way. It's okay to disagree. You should not be violating some students' rights to insulate other students' feelings. Different opinions, disagreements, healthy debate, these are all things that cause us to reflect, research, and use our brains. We can't have that if we don't have freedom of speech. I urge you to stop this lawsuit and the subsequent harm it will do to all of us. Uphold this students' and all students' right to freedom of speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up.
Good evening, Bridget Kearns here. Chairman Young, you were quoted in the paper as saying that the district has been repeatedly reminded that Massachusetts schools have deemed transgendered students a protected class. The school is doing what it's supposed to do to protect those children. I would like you to substantiate this statement with documentation from whomever it is that is reminding you of this. I find it very strange that you suggest that you have to protect some students. I would think that all students are worthy of protection and the right to be safe and protected for who they are, regardless of whether they fit into a protected class category or not. It is clear that this district is not only protecting some more than others, they are also protecting some at the expense of others, and this is unacceptable. The superintendent stated that the dividing line for her was when all students are not protected or accepted for who they are, either directly or indirectly. Superintendent, the actions against Liam and many other students across the district clearly demonstrate how truly empty those words are. Liam is not accepted. Liam is not protected. To remain silent about your beliefs, your opinions, or who you are is not okay. And that goes for members of the LGBT community and everybody else. The constructive dialogue that is needed to bring us together is not that one side wins while the other side concedes. Being good role models is teaching children that you can treat others with dignity and respect even when you don't hold the same beliefs. You do not get to make unilateral decisions on what constitutes hate speech. That is exactly why our Constitution is framed the way it is, to protect free speech to everyone. To suggest that words on Liam's shirt are in the same category as the N-word and a swastika is so far out of line, Chairman Young. It is manipulation of language to suit your agenda. This is a slippery slope, and it is time to swallow your pride and your ego and stop this lawsuit from going forward. For centuries, the words sex and gender have been interchangeable. They are even listed as synonyms in the dictionary. Students only have to look at your handbook to see that there, too, it refers to both sexes and either gender. Both means two, and either one of two. I guess the handbook either supports Liam or is filled with hate speech targeting the very students you are claiming to protect. Mr. Avatabli has reminded me frequently in recent weeks that change takes time, and forcing people to share your belief or try to navigate a relatively new and complex culture that has ever-changing rules is not going to happen with an aggressive action against those who hold sincere beliefs that are protected in the same non-discrimination category.
Thank you. Welcome.
Awfully tall. So, hi, my name is Jody Jans Carlton, and I wasn't going to speak here tonight. I wasn't going to be here tonight, but my daughter received an award for math, and I'm here to support Mrs. Tucker and her goals for the new year. But when people started to speak, I felt I needed to be heard as well, is that my children are 2 of 3 Jewish students in the junior high in 6th grade. And I will tell you that there is a difference, a big difference, between freedom of speech and having it plastered in words on a t-shirt. There are people that don't believe the Holocaust happened. That's true. I've been told that the Holocaust never happened. 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. That's the truth of it. I have had my house egged. I have had my decorations torn down because I'm Jewish. My family is Jewish. I am proud to be Jewish. I am proud to be friends with anybody that is okay with my religion. If they are okay with me, I am okay with them. I'm even okay if they have the belief that the Holocaust didn't happen. That's their belief. They have the right to speak of it. Am I okay if a student walked into the building with something that said the Nazis were right? No, I'm not. And I refuse to be so. And if that means that I cannot support a child walking in saying that there are only two genders, because yes, there are, right. The clownfish changes gender depending upon, and I know I have them in my house, which one of them grows bigger? The bigger one is the female. They're all born boys. The female, the bigger one, that's the girl. The boy stays small, the girl gets bigger. So there are animals that change gender. So I want to tell you right now, there is freedom of speech. Any one of you right now could tell me I'm wrong, that I'm bad because I'm a Jew and I'm going to hell. Guess what? Jews don't believe in hell. So it's all good with me. But I'll also tell you, you wear it to my house, you wear a shirt that says that to my house, and I will personally take it off your back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, excuse me. Ashley Otway. Good evening. Tonight, I wanted to address the entire school committee and Superintendent Lyons. First Amendment protection of free speech is essential for all. The actions of the Middleborough Public School Administration against Liam was not a reasonable limitation of his First Amendment rights, and the town is facing a lawsuit. To suggest that there are only two genders is comparable to racial slurs and symbols of the German Nazi Party is not only absurd, but insulting to those who suffered and endure legitimate hatred. Opposing points of view are not threats of violence or proclamations of hate, and we need to model healthy acceptance for all, equal protection, and opportunity for all to have their voices heard. The chair is on record stating that he has not sought the counsel of the firm assigned to the school committee and that this matter can only be discussed in executive session. Why has no executive session been called prior to today? Why hasn't the law firm that represents the school committee been consulted prior to the suit being filed? And why have the other school committee members not been given the opportunity to be heard about this matter? The school committee has officially been listed as a defendant in the lawsuit, and the plaintiffs are seeking nominal damages. These nominal damages and costs of litigation will be at the expense of the taxpayers of Middleborough. You were given the opportunity to do right by the town and district, but instead chose to stand your ground and risk the now filed lawsuit. Chairman Young, your duty now is to protect the fellow members of the school committee and the taxpayers of Middleborough, not the superintendent. School committee members, per the board governance and operations of the school committee policy manual, quote, the committee is responsible for the development of policies as guides for administrative action and for employing a superintendent who will implement its policies, end quote. You're not only able, but are expected to question district policies as well as the superintendent, and for anyone to suggest otherwise is nothing but an attempt to silence you. You are able and allowed to engage with members of the public in open comment with privileged information excluded, and you cannot be silenced by the chair. Speak up. Apathetic committee members will no longer be tolerated. Staying silent will only allow the insanity of fighting a lawsuit all the way up to the Supreme Court to continue, all to indulge the superintendent and chair's principled stand. Superintendent Lyons and Chairman Young, You clearly have not prioritized the best interest of the town and the district as a whole, and my family calls for your resignation. Thank you.
Anyone else? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Jalen Goff. I go to school at Nichols Middle School, and I'm also a 6th grader. This is my friend Emily, and we've been getting bullied, and I've been getting harassed and getting racial comments about how I'm Asian. And I know there's Asian hate going around in this world, and I feel like we should change that. And I've confronted a lot of teachers about this problem in the school, how I'm getting called a chink, and how they're saying ching chong, pulling their eyes back and calling me a dog eater. I think that's really disrespectful, and most teachers weren't doing anything about it. There was only 2 other teachers that would talk to them or have consequences with them. But my friend Emily is also getting fat shamed and getting other things thrown at her and stuff. And I don't want to see her going through this. It really breaks my heart, and sorry. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? You can't go a second time. You've had your 3 minutes. No, that's why if you've already gone once, you're all set. Anybody else? Seeing no one, I'll move on. Next item on the agenda is reports from school committee members. Zeke, go right ahead.
So, 2 things. Yesterday, the day before, I had the pleasure of attending an advisory council for interviewing for the new principal for NMS, which was great. And something had come up there that I just wanted to talk about, which was that there has been some major improvement in the cafeteria, and that the students are cleaning up after themselves, and a lot of the teachers there have been praising Principal Tucker, Interim Principal Tucker, for all the work that she's been doing. So I want to thank her for all of that hard work. And I also want to congratulate the students for learning and evolving along in these difficult times, because they deserve a lot of credit.
Thank you, Zeke. Anybody else? Chris, go right ahead.
I also have 2 items. The first, just a request of any updates on the safety audit that we've been talking about.
Do you want me to answer that now? Yes. So I forwarded a list of potential providers to all 3 school resource officers and our dirt leader, Andrew Dizell. They are vetting those companies. Actually, I spoke with Brian Wixton this week, who told me, SRO Brian Wixton, that he would review the companies and be back in touch. He also had conducted some research on his own and received information from a vendor. One of his concerns, which has been one of my concerns, is the qualifications of someone to conduct these audits. So I anticipate talking with him early next week so that we can move forward with a selection for a company.
Okay. Do you just happen to know, is it mostly procedural audits, or will they conduct an actual structural, physical
Each company offers a range of products depending on the price point, but it did range from not just policy or procedure review, but actual facility walkthrough and analysis of the physical plant. So I was looking at an audit that would encompass both facets. It wouldn't just be a physical walkthrough, and it wouldn't just be looking at procedures. It'd be both.
Thank you. I agree with that. And the second, I just want to motion for an emergency executive session following the conclusion of this meeting to discuss litigation.
I can't, because it's not on the agenda.
Can I get a roll call vote?
Okay, I mean, we can do the roll call, that's fine. But you want to do it after this session?
Yeah, we haven't had a chance to actually have an executive session yet.
Okay. And again, we haven't listed it. Okay, that's fine. Chris?
Yes.
Jessica?
Do we have a discussion before a vote?
We can't on executive session motions.
Okay. I don't know what the rules are, so I'm going to abstain because I don't want to go against rules and I don't know what they are.
Okay. Alan?
Just for clarification, if we have a roll call vote that is in favor of having the executive session, can we have it? Or, I mean,
Well, so there's two things. One is we didn't put it on the agenda. And the second piece is we don't have our attorney here to have a discussion about what's going on.
to be honest with you, I don't have any information. So it'd be very difficult to have a discussion in that regard. Nay.
I vote yes.
I see.
I was waiting on a Friday flash to come on Friday for more information, and like you said, we need our attorney in order, so we don't, so yeah, no.
Okay. And the chair votes no. Motion fails 3-2 with one exception. Thank you. One abstention, excuse me.
Along those lines, I think we could probably schedule one for next.
No, well, what we did, what I said was we're going to try to have, I had a conversation with our attorney yesterday. We're trying to set up a meeting. To be honest with you, it's going through who's taking over or who's doing it, and there hasn't been a decision made as of yet.
Can I just make a quick point on
Sure.
that? The whole entire school committee was named in the complaint that was filed. So I think even prior to having the attorney present, we need to speak because we have members of the committee that are speaking to the press, making statements, and then we're being told we're not supposed to be making statements to the press. So I think we all need to discuss this, discuss what the issues are going to be, and some game plan going forward for the entire committee on what we should be doing and what we should not be doing.
Right, and the notice that was sent out about not meeting with the press came from the town manager, and so we sent that to everybody. And the second piece is, again, it doesn't, in my mind, make sense to not have the attorney here to have this conversation. That's all. Jessica?
I want to clarify, I was not abstaining from the desire to have an executive session to discuss it. I was abstaining from voting on having one without knowing what the rules are for when one can occur. I absolutely agree that we need one, but I do think that us all talking about what our options are without having legal counsel present just means we have to have another meeting and go over those things with the legal counsel present. So I think it's more efficient to wait for the legal counsel to be assigned and to then hold the executive session.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they wish to say?
I just have one more thing regarding the interview process that I did. I was asked, as many of the other members that were on that interview committee, to talk to the community about the interviewees. And so I would like to have a one-on-one conversation with the committee, because of course that would cause some problems in terms of the law there. So I need to talk to each of you individually, and I would like to do that. And I would also like to invite any of the members of the public between the end of this meeting, whenever that is, and probably, I think, Saturday evening, because I do need to get an email out to Kevin Avatadle to let him know what everyone's thinking. So if you want to know about the interviewees, I can't give you specifics, but I can give you my feelings and opinions on them and what I learned from them. And I would love to have that conversation with anyone and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
To clarify, you're talking about the Nichols Middle School principal.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Any other school committee member have anything they wish to say? With that, Nate, I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
So starting off with the MEC, the K students went on a field trip to the Zeitarian Theater and thoroughly enjoyed it. Many of the students enjoyed their first bus ride for some, and it was the first time on the bus on the highway. Pre-K was a visit planned at the MEC from Barn Babies that we are looking forward to, and the K is planning a second field trip to the Balmy Acres Farm. This time of year is very busy with visits to the library, fire station, and as well as the musical performances, book fair, and field day. We're also planning on our parade to first grade for our K students. For the MKG, we are very excited to have completed the 2023 MCAS on Friday, May 19th from 5:30 to 7. We have a Camp Reads a Lot for grades 1 and 2. Grade 2 will be visiting the Middleborough Public Library next week. Grade 4 will be having their Living at Wax Museum showcase on Wednesday, May 24th for Mr. Messier, Miss Amato, and Miss Cronin's classes, and then followed by Miss Penny, Miss Grady, and Miss Russell's class on Thursday. Both days will be 11:15 to 12:30. Grade 2 will be visiting Roger Williams Zoo on May 31st, and grade 5 will be having their annual science fair. May 31st will be Miss Couquette's, Miss Baldwin, and Mr. O'Brien's classes. On June 1st will be Miss Marinelli's, Miss Winterbottom's, and Miss Goldman's classes. Both days will be from 2 to 2:45. And then for the MHS, congratulations to the 58 new members of the Middleborough High School National Honor Society who were inducted on Monday evening. And bravo to the MHS music program. The annual spring concert was outstanding. Congratulations to the MHS class of 2024 for the amazing junior prom. The Starry Night was just awesome. Congratulations to the unified track team for winning the Division I South Sectional Championship on Wednesday. And then a job well done, and thank you to the hundreds of student athletes who volunteered at the track meet, and a job well done to the many students who engaged in their AP exams this past week.
Thank you, my friend. Any questions for Nate?
How'd the track meet go?
It's going pretty good. I think there's like one event left. I gotta go back out there to cheer him on, but pretty good so far.
So, Nate, we wanted to say goodbye to you. We know this is your last meeting, and you'll be graduating next week, or in 2 weeks. So, Jessica, if you want to, we have a little present for you.
And Nate, I've had the pleasure of knowing you even before you took on this role, and I got to see you grow. I find you to be a remarkable person. The grace and maturity in which you have always held yourself, and your willingness to help others has always just been such a big part of your character. And so I know you will do well, but we also wish you the best of luck at Franklin Pierce and in your continued adventures.
Thank you so much. Should we get a picture?
Yeah, definitely a picture, my friend. With that, I'll turn it over to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Young, members of the school committee. Tonight, I have a couple of items to address, and I'm going to start with new positions for the 2023-2024 school year. These are positions that have been posted, and I'm going to break down each one here. The first is a position that actually represents two positions at the John T. Nichols Middle School. There are 3 grade levels at the Nichols, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and currently 2 of those grade levels function with 3 teams of teachers, where 1 grade level has 2 teams of teachers. This has led to, as enrollment has increased, large class size in whatever grade level is selected to be the grade with 2 teams. So the addition of 2 teachers will allow there to be 3 teams at each grade level, which will reduce class size. This has been made possible in part by the project at School Street School, which has taken administration out of those offices and allowed the building to maximize that space for students. Similarly, there is the addition of, it's really 0.5 time of a music teacher at the John T. Nichols Middle School. Right now, we have a 0.5 position. This increases that position to full-time. The reason for this addition has to do with growing a robust and important music program to this district. As we've seen increasing numbers at the elementary level with students playing instruments, getting involved with music, and some of the professional development with our Unified Arts Department and vertical articulation teams, it's been made very clear that this is something that is essential to watching this program grow. So that's the justification for this position. And then lastly is the additional classroom teacher at the Henry B. Birkeland Elementary School. And again, this is also driven by increases in enrollment and a desire to keep class size at a manageable number. So these are the new positions. Before I move on to anything else, I didn't know if there were questions about these positions.
Teacher at HBB allocated for a specific grade, or will it wait to see numbers and then figure out how everything gets shuffled?
Well, I'm looking at Mr. Thompson. I mean, so the reality is it is earmarked for a particular grade level right now, and it's fourth.
Okay.
This time of year is famous for moves and then also increases in enrollment. So while I know Principal Thompson has an idea of where that position's going to be, I don't want to lock us into a particular grade level.
Shuffle, then figure out. Gotcha.
But that is always based on, truthfully, class size. And so managing the personnel that he has in that building in order to best meet the needs of the numbers in front of him. So without additional questions, I'm going to move on to school choice. And what I want to talk about tonight is a data collection process. Our school registrar, Katie Godine, and Director of Communications, Sean Siciliano, helped collect information that I sent to the school committee, because I think it's important that whatever decision gets made, you base it on information that we can collect, share, and talk about what's going on in terms of numbers in our school district. And what I can tell you is the data that I included involves a longer look at enrollment data for years between 2018 to the present. I purposefully selected years before the pandemic because we did see some fluctuations in numbers during the pandemic, and I didn't want to just use 2 years or 3 years. So I went as far back as 2018. We also looked at projections versus actual enrollment. Every spring, there is a desire to try to project what our enrollment's going to be. That number doesn't become actual until a reporting gets completed by Ms. Godine in October of every year. So it's important to know, is that projection accurate? Are we falling short, or are we enrolling more than what we're projecting? Projections are just that. It's very hard to get that number correct, and it's based on a lot of different factors. Class size, or an approximation of class size, is also an important data point, because you need to understand how many students are in each classroom, because the number of students in a classroom is a pretty big factor in terms of instruction and a teacher's ability to reach all those students. Next is what I call transfers and withdrawals. Whenever you're going to look at enrollment data, you should be looking at and asking, well, how many kids transferred either, into our district or withdrew out of our district and went somewhere else? And what's that net gain? Are we negative on the year when you look at those numbers? Are we positive on the year when you look at those numbers? And then finally, building projects. The reason I included building projects is because if there is development happening presently, it's conceivable that there are residents who haven't yet moved here, who are about to, that would need to have seats come fall, particularly this time of year. So I was talking with Bob Whalen at the town about what the ongoing projects are, and I included that data for you as well. So I'm going to go into some of that data now. And the first thing I want to talk about is the MPS district enrollment from 2018, current, including some projections for 2024. And what you'll see, this is broken down by the secondary level enrollment, grades 6 through 12, elementary enrollment as evidenced by grades 1 through 5, K, pre-K, and then totals. So what I want to point your attention to is the fact that we are on an upward trend. What we saw in 2018 was a number under 3,000 students, which had started to increase in 2019. During 2020, that number declined, rose again in 2021, and you can see between October of 2022 and 2023, it is somewhat level. So I wanted to give you this information so that you could see what's been going on over a period of time with our enrollment data. Next, I want to talk about what I'm calling plus or minus student moves. These are those transfers, the withdrawals that I was talking about earlier, kids who are transferring into our district and students who are withdrawing out of our district. So if you look at this data, this is just over the last 3 years, 2021, 21-22, and 22-23. And this is also broken down by building, so you can see, and you'll note I did not include MEC in these numbers. What you'll see is ultimately that there is, if you go back to 2021, a net loss of 60 students for that school year. As of 2021, a net gain of 81 students, and as of this school year, a net gain of 71 students. So what's important for you to know is that there's projections and enrollment over the course of the year, but because enrollment is rolling, anytime a student moves or goes away, you have to look at what's the net effect on the district. And what is evidenced here, at least for the last 2 years, is picking up a considerable number of students throughout the school year. I also shared data regarding students who transferred to private schools and from private schools over the last 3 years. I don't have a slide on it, but I want to talk with you a little bit about that concept, because there are students who transfer out of our school system and go to a private school. So to be clear, I'm not talking about Bristol Plymouth or Bristol Aggie or Norfolk Aggie. What I'm talking about is a private institution, okay? And similarly, students who are coming back into district from an institution like that. And what I can tell you is in 2021, we had 24 students transfer to private institutions who had previously been on our rolls. In 2021, 2022, that number dropped to 11, and it was 0 this year. 0 students had that kind of motion out of the district. When I look at students transferring from private into the school district, I'm seeing those numbers at an increasing rate. So, and I won't go through each number, but what I want you to take note of is that ultimately we're retaining students throughout the school year, more so than we were in previous years. And I think that's part of the story in terms of what's happening with our enrollment. Next, I want to talk about class size. And I want to be very careful with this particular slide, because class size is not an exact science when you're talking about an entire grade level. And that's for a variety of factors. I'll start with the high school, because you'll see the class sizes listed in 9th, 10th, and 11th. These are a general average. It's not an actual number. And that's because, let's just look at the high school. There are different classes. If you look at an English class, which is what these numbers were based upon, English was selected because of the frequency at which students must take English. It's going to vary depending on what topic you're in and what level you're in. So that's not to say that every 9th grade class has 19 students in it, but it is used as an average. If you look at the middle school, you'll see the justification for the third team right here in terms of, the class size being so much higher at grade 6. That is a function of fewer personnel. And then if you go to the elementary level, you can see the class sizes there. The other thing that's important to note, particularly at the elementary level, when you're trying to count class size, we also have specialized programs and students that may be assigned a homeroom in a specialized program, but those students may be inside the other classrooms as well. So trying to account for class size is not an exact science. I share these numbers with you so that they are instructional. But class size is particularly instructive when you're looking at what's going on with our enrollment, how full our classes are, and whether or not, and to assess whether or not there's ultimately space for others. And that's my data on school choice. Oh wait, I have one more piece of information. I did want to talk with you about what Mr. Whalen explained to me in terms of development. Because the thing about town development is that it isn't real until it happens, and even once it happens, it isn't real for the school system until children are in those homes, they're in occupancy and enrolling into our district. So this is also not an exact science. But he offers to me that there are 50 single-family homes currently under construction. He also has indicated that the planning board has 2 subdivisions getting approvals for a total of 38 homes. And the 40B apartment building on West Grove Street will include 3 buildings of 160 units with a total of 214 bedrooms. He notes that there are additional proposed apartments at the Friedman Junkyard on East Grove Street as well. So that's what's going on with development. What this doesn't tell us is how many children will move in and how many of those children are going to go to our schools. So that's information, again, that I offer to you as you ponder the decision as to how to approach school choice. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have about either the data or anything else related to enrollment.
Go right ahead.
I was going to ask, is the net loss in 2020 to 2021, do you believe that's from COVID?
Yeah, well, so yeah, I mean, I
Definitely.
do think that what was happening in 2021, there was a couple of factors. We were seeing increases of students who were homeschooled.
Right.
And we also saw increases of students who, were going to school elsewhere. So yes, I personally think it's impacted by COVID, but I don't have the reasons. Do you know what I mean? I
Correct.
didn't, in
Right,
fairness,
right.
my data didn't ask, what the reason for exit was.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah? Oh, sorry.
In terms of the private schools transferring to and from, I know COVID hit a lot of private schools hard, and some of them had to close their doors. Does anybody have a sense of, from the private schools that students usually transfer to and from, are they still in existence? So is that still a population to evaluate, or are there fewer that are still operational?
I only know of one closure that likely impacted these numbers, but that doesn't, again, my numbers don't.
Coyle Cassidy.
Coyle Cassidy, exactly, which is why when you look at the numbers transferred from private, there was a very high number in 2021 and 21-22, and I think that does coincide with the closure of Coyle.
Yep.
But I haven't heard of additional closures, and if
Okay.
you look at this year's data, only 4 students transferred from private, which tells me private schools are happening, and we're not seeing a major influx of students return from private settings.
Okay. My other question was, do we have estimates of how many homeschool students we have enrolled in the district right now?
I do not have that number in front of me. I do have the ability to give you that information, and our homeschool coordinator happens to be my director of curriculum and instruction. Last I checked, that number hovered around 80 to 90. It's significantly higher right now that she's reporting. Do you have that number handy? 150.
150? Okay, thank you.
Do we know if these numbers include homeschool children who, for example, come into school for various, I know in the past we've had homeschool children come in for maybe Spanish class or physics or something like that.
So by virtue of being on the homeschool list, all homeschool students are offered opportunities.
Right, I'm just wondering, do these numbers include any of the coming into classes and doing?
That would.
Okay, good.
But only likely if they, for
I'd
the
have-
high school level, only if they came in for an English class,
Right.
since that's where it was based on, but.
Well, it could happen at any level. We've made that offer to kids over the years, you know, even at elementary levels. If it's helpful to come in for a period of the day, then that's certainly an offer. I could get that information if you were interested in getting more specifics, but.
Well, you mentioned for the high school, the average class size was based on the English classes, because that makes sense. For the rest of them, are those based on homerooms?
Well, it's different. So, I mean, yes and no. So when you look at kindergarten, for example, they're in their classroom all day.
Right.
So that number is a lot more reliable because we know how many children are enrolled in kindergarten and we know how many classrooms we have. With the exception of, again, specialized programming. When you look at grades 1st through 5th, pretty much same rules apply because there is one classroom and one teacher. So, you know what I mean, in terms of your assignment. Where that goes a little crazier is at secondary. So homeroom was what was used in terms of, you know, personnel for grades 6 through 8.
Yep.
And then 9th through 12th was English class.
I just think my point was a homeschool enrolled student is less likely to be counted in the existing averages for the numbers of
Correct.
K through 8. It's a little harder to know for sure.
Correct.
But that's still a potential of 150
But-
students to
Yeah.
consider. Okay. Okay, so that's another
But it-
150 schools in the students potentially in the area.
But
Yep.
I also don't want to overstate how many homeschool students come into the district, because that number is not 150.
Yep.
That is the offer, but that doesn't mean all families avail themselves of that offer.
Understood.
Okay.
Alan, can I ask you a question, since you sit on the planning board too? Do you know when the West Grove Street comes online, or supposed to?
No, not off the top of my head. I do know that the Freeman junkyard's gonna be a little bit, because there's some contamination in the soil issues.
Okay, then thank you. That's what I wasn't sure about. Go ahead, Marcy.
What is the financial benefit to the district right now if we allow school choice children per child? What would that benefit be?
So I'll defer to Ms. Hickey. We get a per student rate for every seat that we offer for school choice. If the student is eligible for special education, there is an additional incremental form that you can seek additional funding for. It is not a straight line equation in terms of the cost of educating. The state doesn't reimburse at a 100% rate of the cost of educating students eligible for special education. But for school choice, do you know the rate?
$5,000 per student.
So it hasn't changed, it's 5,000 per head. And it's renewable each year.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Here, Alan?
I just have a quick question. So 6th grade seems to have 28, well, it does have 28 students per class. Is that the 2 teams?
That's right.
All right, and then we're gonna rectify that with the.
That
So
should be rectified. Because
When
we
this
have
class
space.
moves to 7th grade next year, we
Yeah.
probably won't see the 28 per student.
Right, the
for a
reason the class size is so high is because 6th grade operated with 2 teams. Had there
Oh.
been 3 teams, that class size would have been a lower number.
Beautiful, thank you.
Anybody in the committee have questions? Teresa?
Just a couple questions. I apologize if I missed it, because that was a lot of data there. Do we have a number of current school choice students in the districts? Like, what's the total number that are currently here?
You know what, I did not pull that number
Okay. All
of
right,
school
so
choice currently.
if
We
we
do
could-
have some, we do
Sure.
have some seats, and regardless of decision, those seats are permanent until that student graduates.
Right, so that brings me to my next piece, which would be the data collected on these particular children who are in our district, who have been welcomed into Middleborough in the past through school choice. Last year's decision was very abrupt for families who had siblings that they had intended to also send to Middleborough or had hoped that they would have that seat. So I feel as though we should be at least looking at the possibility of phasing school choice out, and rather than being so abrupt with that. So look at how many you have, look at how many are graduating. I happen to know of at least one, but perhaps more, who are graduating this year, and so they're out of the district and they're no longer going to be here next year. Look at all those students who are here as school choice students and what their sibling situation looks like. They are students in this district, so they have been given that opportunity to be here, and I feel as though we should at least honor their families and give them a chance to keep their children together rather than have to separate them into two separate districts. So I would just ask that before you make a decision, you get that information in front of you, and you look at how that does impact the district, how many are leaving, how many will be coming in. That's all. Thank you.
Hi, Sarah Zagoras. I also wanted to make a comment about school choice and how last year's decision to mirror the words of Teresa was very abrupt. And it really left families that had children in the district that were already accepted, that had siblings that they were expecting to send, really put them in a very bad situation. So I would really like for it to be considered that siblings of current accepted school choice, people that are already enrolled here that have been coming here for years, that their siblings be included in part of that school choice to bring the families together. Otherwise, you're at risk of losing those school choice kids and having their families pull them to keep them in the same district. So, thank you.
Question. If I remember correctly, last year we voted not to, go forward with student choice. So, to my understanding, though, that although we wanted to support those families, we couldn't for whatever reason?
Well, so numbers had increased. So, for example, in the kindergarten, the numbers went up from 230 to 240, and now they're up to 250.
Right.
We haven't increased the size. We haven't added teachers, stuff like that. The pre-K has gone up high, the secondary and elementary have roughly stayed the same. I think part of what we've seen is more kids, for example, go to the high school. In the past, we would lose more students to BP. Students have tended to stay. There's also, I think, part of the reason we get the transfer backs is because the way the system's structured at BP, in the sense that if, depending on how well you do in your first year, then you get to choose what you want moving forward. And in some cases, kids went to school hoping for X and didn't get X, so then they decided to come back. So we've seen an influx. I mean, the other problem, to be quite frankly, is the housing development in Middleborough. The number of houses has increased tremendously, and we continue to see more students from there. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, we went to the planning board. Brian had said some numbers. I think with a house in town, it averages about 1 student per house on average, and then in an apartment in town, it's something like point something per apartment, the way the averages work out, if I remember that conversation correct. So, I mean, we get it from both sides. We've built a beautiful high school that people like to stay at. We've continued growing, and so I think part of it is, I mean, again, if you look at projections, right? If you look at last year, they projected 2995, and by the end of last year it was 3060. So those numbers went up over projections because we continue to get in. That would be a concern. I know the year before it was a little off, but yeah, it's a tough piece.
Do we choose how many positions are available for school?
We have, yeah.
Yeah. So
we chose based on.
Is that per school basis or per grade basis?
Well, to be honest with you, if I'm if I'm correct, and please tell me if I'm not, when we did the elementary school, we've set numbers for the kindergarten, we've set numbers for the elementary school. The vast majority of elementary school students went to HBB because HBB has lesser students than MKG. And so even though we're setting an elementary number, it's not one school. It's you're going to the population of one particular school. Okay. Same applied to the number for Nichols, and here we've had a sort of a smaller number at times too, based on the fact that, again, the volume here has increased greatly, primarily because we're at, in theory, we're at capacity, but we're not at capacity because this place was built with a percentage increase that we're still not under, but it's still, it creates some problems in various places.
I just want to add on, piggyback on that and what others have said. I would like the committee to just consider to allow siblings of students currently on school choice here. I think a lot of families last year, with the decision that was made by the committee, pulled all of their kids. So I don't even know how many families we have currently that have younger siblings that want to come in. And also, after reviewing our policy and speaking with some employees within the district, I would also like the committee to consider that we allow school choice for employees of the Middleborough Public Schools.
We can't.
It's in here. It states that all applicants whose parents are employed by Middleborough Public Schools will be placed prior to an enrollment lottery.
Yeah, it can't anymore. It used to be that way. And then in actuality, it was part of the teacher's contract at one point. And so when we were looking at the teacher's contract, it was pointed out to us that it was no longer legal. That's the way it was set up. School choice policy was set up, that staff had priority, because part of it was, bringing students in. You had a parent who worked here, but that can't be part of the priority anymore.
So if it's illegal, it's illegal by state law?
Yeah.
And could you send me what that?
It's under DESE, the rules for school choice.
Does it govern the ability to prioritize them so that they can still be in the lottery, they just can't be prioritized?
Correct. They can't be prioritized. It's a prioritization, not saying that they can't be part of it, but it's a prioritization.
Do we know, I'm just curious, why was that change made? That feels rather important to teachers.
It was, I think what happened was people included it in contracts, and then DESE made a decision that it wasn't going to be that way, because that's not what, they wanted to make sure that there were opportunities for students from
every student.
Yeah, that's all.
Makes sense. All right, thank you.
It started that way. It was always that way. It was sort of a nugget for teachers and staff, but that had since changed. And to be honest with you, we hadn't heard about it until we had that discussion
in the most recent negotiations.
I think it might have been before that, to be honest with you.
Oh, okay.
I got to remember. But I remember we had that conversation.
All right, thank you.
In order to honor the request to allow siblings in, we can't make any decision until we have some sense of how many students are currently enrolled in school choice, how many siblings there are, what grades those siblings are in, and at a certain point, would the parents want those students to be eligible for school choice or not? Because if we're going to vote on school choice and we have to decide numbers and placement don't necessarily help siblings unless they align with where the siblings would need to end up. So I feel like if that's the request, we don't have the necessary data in order to determine if the request is feasible.
So the only other thing the committee needs to be aware of is that there is a form due to the state on June 1st. So I would recommend trying to get together prior to June 1st, because the way school choice works is you're automatically enrolled unless you affirmatively tell the state you're not enrolled. So I can certainly gather that data before June 1st.
But when would we be able to vote on that? Because we won't have a meeting in between.
We can
and
have a meeting.
We can have
If-
one. We can
you
just
know,
schedule
depending
one.
what people want, we can set up a
we need 10 days, or how many days?
3.
Oh, only 3 days to
48
establish
hours.
an agenda. Okay.
That's fine.
I thought for some reason I had in my head that it was more to establish an agenda. Okay, thank
And if we're gonna do that, I would like to have a copy of the law from DESI that.
Yeah, I'll
about-
find that piece. That's not a
about
problem.
Employees, okay.
I think everyone here wants to try and make that work. So, yeah, if we could just get that kind of data is, you know, how many siblings, how many students are there that are in school choice that have siblings? I think that's really just
I
it.
believe that law is Mass General Law, Chapter 76, Section 12B. I'll double check. 12B. It's either 71 or 76. It's 76. There we go. Thank you.
And is it on, I'm just trying to think back to what's on the enrollment paperwork when you enroll. I recall having to put siblings down as of the time the paperwork is filed. So hopefully we have at least for the current school choice students, sibling lists on the paperwork.
That information is obtainable.
Okay.
So is a vote required right now to delay?
No. If we don't vote before June 1st, we're part of it, and then it's the setup of numbers more than anything else.
All right.
So if we don't vote, we're automatically enrolled in school choice?
Correct.
So if that happens, can you just set the open enrollment to 0 at every school, or no? You have to allow?
You can't bypass it by setting it to 0.
Okay, so you would have to allow. Is there a minimum number of children that have to be
I
like
don't
for each
believe,
school?
I can check, but I don't believe that there is a minimum.
Okay.
So theoretically, we could just set the minimum to the number of siblings that are on the list?
I believe that would be permissible, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to open that to every.
There is a
every-
lottery, well, no, this is where that rule comes into play.
There is sibling preference, right?
Well, I think that's what Chairman Young was saying, is that the siblings cannot sit ahead of, there is a lottery. The way
There's a
school choice
siblings
happens
get
is a lottery.
preference. They can have preference, but
Teachers,
teachers'
children don't get
children.
preference, but siblings get preference. Siblings of current school choice students get preference.
So what's the difference? Explain to me what's the difference when a student is preferred over the lottery?
So, for example, let's say in kindergarten, there were 2 slots open. If 10 children apply and 2 are siblings, those 2 take the 2 slots.
Okay.
If there are 3 siblings, there'd be a lottery for the 3, not for the 10. That would be the difference.
Okay.
But the reality is, if we open it up, because we believe there are 3 siblings who are coming into kindergarten, and of the parents, they do not wish to have the sibling into the program. If we've opened up 3 slots, then we have 3 slots, and somebody can take that slot, and now we have another student in the program that is a non-sibling.
Yes, that's correct.
That would be the requirement.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Okay, so I will move on. And I would invite all of the principals up. Actually, I'll start with the elementary principals who are going to speak first to talk about our school improvement presentation this evening. By way of review, in October of 2022, our principals came to school committee meeting to talk about their school improvement plans for the 22-23 school year. Tonight, they'll be reviewing the work that occurred over this school year and giving you a preview about the school improvement plan to come next school year. This is work that's done alongside with their school councils, and they'll be back in October of 2023 to present next year's plan in full. So with that, I will turn to elementary, and we'll go from there. Welcome, Mr. Gobiel and Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. Good evening. Mrs. White will be in here in a minute, so I'll stall. I'm just kidding. So this is an update on our current plan and the work that we've been doing this year on the plan that we presented in the beginning of the fall. And just a quick thank you to the school committee members who have joined us this year, Mrs. Adler, Mrs. Rowan, Mrs. Alshorn, his parents, and Mrs. Cooney, Ms. Delvecchio, Mrs. Latender, Mrs. Madigan, staff members that have joined this year. As we've been working on checking in on our current plan and developing our plan for next year. Our goal this year, we have 3 goals in total at HBB. The first is to improve student performance in literacy, and we've had a couple sub-goals, I guess, underneath that. We've been trying to work to improve teacher skill sets in the areas of writing, word study, reading foundational skills in handwriting, increased engagement in our students as readers and writers, and ensure all students are on a path of growth. We've also been working on updating curriculum. So this year, there's been a lot of differentiated PD, especially targeted towards teachers in their first 3 years. One big accomplishment has been the selection of a foundational literacy program for next year, which we're going to be using, which is called UFly, which is a University of Florida Literacy Institute. That's going to be something we're working on in all 3 schools going forward next year. One thing I've been doing a lot of this year, which has been kind of fun, is publishing student writing, which is really, for kids to see themselves as writers. I feel like it's a really important opportunity for kids to publish their writing. So we've been in the newsletter every week, taking different selections of kids' writing and publishing. It's been a lot of fun. We do have a lot of curriculum writing going on this year. It's really started this year. It's going to be working all summer. We have curriculum articulation teams, vertical articulation teams, and curriculum writing teams going on. We've implemented the Handwriting Without Tears program this year, and we've continued our work in our professional learning communities, really looking at student data, making sure all of our students are on a path of growth and providing interventions as needed in literacy. In math, very similar to our goal in literacy, we're trying to expand our teachers' skill set in a variety of areas in math. Really, we just want our teachers to be able to meet the needs of kids as mathematicians. Also, increasing engagement in math. So we've done some, we just recently completed a math-themed Spirit Week, which was a lot of fun. We've been doing a lot with ST Math and GG. We actually won a GG costume this year. The kids have loved it. So staff members dress up like GG, walk around for different celebrations. And similar to literacy, we've been really committed and focused on keying in on kids that are struggling. And we do that work in professional learning communities. We look at our assessments, we figure out which kids are struggling, and then we provide interventions from there. And also we've been doing some curriculum work led by Kelly Stukenberg. That work's really been looking at different programs for next year and really mapping out what our plan for curriculum is going to be as we move forward. Our third goal is to foster an inclusive environment for students and families so that all students feel like they belong and are equipped with the social emotional learning skills required to meet success. Some of the things we've been working hard to improve is really teacher and student competencies in a number of different areas. Also our homeschool partnership, because this is really where our work with parents intersect in a lot of different ways. And also ensuring that all students are on a path of growth. So we also spend a lot of time looking at data. We have a number of different supports for kids that are struggling in different areas. We created a new student group this year that our adjustment counselors run. We have intervention groups in the morning for kids that are maybe struggling making friends, might be struggling controlling their emotions, things like that. And one of the big projects that we have been working on, we're going to touch on after Mrs. White presents her slides, because it's something we've been working on across complex.
Thank you. So at Mary Kay Good, our new school council members for this year, we added Susie Winterbottom, who is a teacher, Meg Larson, a teacher, Linda Lincoln, a parent, and Emily Temple, who is a parent. So what I did here is I kept kind of the presentation as I did in the fall when we put our goals forward, our improvement of our instruction in literacy. We are continuing to work on our workshop model, providing professional development for our new teachers, especially in their first 3 years, with balanced literacy, making sure that they have the components, the writing, especially the foundational literacy that Mr. Thompson had mentioned that we're looking at UFly for next year. We have our job-embedded professional development with coaching and our professional learning communities, and this is provided by the coaches. So what I was able to do this year was I added an additional 45-minute professional development session in the morning. So our town meeting, we added an additional, we have a town meeting and then we have we call it the extra special, and we're able to add an additional time for teachers. It's a kind of a combination. We do, during that time, we do either professional development or it's an additional team time for teachers to work together at their grade levels for curriculum conversations. Develop and refine our curriculum maps and trajectories. This is work that our teachers are doing with the curriculum team. It's started and it's still ongoing, and we look forward to that work over the summer. Our focus being on the foundational literacy skills in grades 1 and 2, and we're looking at the focus being writing in grades 3 through 5. Our assessment, our benchmark assessments, our STAR 360, our early bird dyslexia screening. These are ongoing, and this gives us important data for our students and decisions really about curriculum and also about the instruction and the learning that's going on. It provides us with information on student groupings and meeting our student needs at an individual and also group levels for our students. We have our multi-tiered system of support, our MTSS Academy, which we have a group of teachers that are involved with. Our tiered level of support for English language arts, our child study team. When we have a student in a classroom that may be struggling in a particular area, the teachers will bring a student forward to a team that may be admin, or maybe our school adjustment counselor, our special education department, our OT, speech, to have conversations about what we can do to meet the needs of the child in a different way. Everyone, bringing all the great minds to the table to have a conversation. We're also doing our positive behavioral intervention supports, our PBIS, and this team is done a fabulous job this year, not only with introducing, we're just rolling out our student positive behavioral referrals that we're rolling out right now, but we started with the staff. It's important, staff morale and staff culture is important as well for a positive environment for our kids, and we really have focused a lot on our staff this year with some fun activities that they've planned throughout the course of the year. Our implementation of handwriting without tears, that's been implemented by our classroom teachers, and I know handwriting has been an issue, and I know it is one of those things that we've talked about that's kind of fallen off the wayside in the last, especially through COVID, and we saw that happen, so that was something that we definitely thought was important to have, so our students have that structure and have the techniques for writing, the actual craft of. Responding to reading benchmarks and monitoring and analyzing calibration. This is writing. This is really looking at, there's different types of writing. There's writing, writing a story because it's just fun to read. There's reading something and being able to take pieces of text and having a student analyze them and be able to respond to that. So we're looking at all of these different benchmarks and monitoring. Our next goal is a math goal, and it's to improve and ensure our improvement of growth in grades 1 to 5 in mathematics. So again, we're refining our curriculum maps. This is also going on with our curriculum teams. It's ongoing, and it's going to be summer work that continues. Our professional development provided by our coaches and with Kelly Stukenberg, who really, I will tell you, our teachers are really getting a lot from. I've heard some great feedback from our teachers about this professional development in math. It's really teaching content and skill and manipulatives and how do we embed this all in our classrooms and having a workshop model in our classrooms so we're meeting all of the diverse needs for mathematics in our classrooms. Again, with not only the outside time that we spend in professional development, but having coaches go into the classroom so they're working alongside the teachers, so they're seeing the students and how they're working and the ways that we can enhance and even further differentiate and enrich our mathematics. We're using our STAR 360 assessment. Our teachers are implementing those, and we are analyzing that data. Again, part of our MTSS and our child study team with looking at math data, looking at student work, and how do we enrich it, how do we make it better. I will say you might have got a costume, we got a skateboard for ST Math. We got a golden skateboard this year. That is a state recognition from ST Math. We developed, and Jessica Hilton, actually, one of our math champions, created, I think I might have shown you if you've been at MKG, our giant poster of Gigi, where every time a student hits a 10% level, they get a black dot, and we are filling in Gigi. That was presented at a state conference, and our school won the Golden Skateboard, which is a high level of achievement in Massachusetts. It's pretty cool. So we were very excited about that. Excuse me? Thank you, I'm not writing it down the hallway. Also, we've made it a point with our after-school clubs to make sure that we're increasing our science and our mathematics. We have a new club coordinator, and we're really looking at the clubs and making sure that we're meeting diverse needs of math and science. Fostering our inclusive environment for students and families. Our students feel like for our students to feel like they belong and are equipped with the social and emotional learning skills required to meet with success. Professional development time spent to look at different topics that our kids are looking at. Providing feedback and analysis through our early bird data is important to us. Looking at our screeners, which is very helpful for us when our school adjustment counselors are pulling groups and being able to lunch groups and intervention groups. Common Choice was expanded to grades 1 to 5. As Mr. Thompson had mentioned, we're going to talk about upgrading our learner behaviors and expectations on our report card, so that's something that our teachers at all grade levels and across the schools are actually working on. We're still working with Character Strong and our Purposeful People, and our teachers are working with our Words of the Month. Our child study team, this is a real crucial piece of what we do during child study. We not only look at the math, the science, the social studies, but also how does behavior and how do those components fit into our tiered system. We did have our parent nights with internet safety. I know that was Mr. Siciliano had helped us provide important information regarding internet safety for our students. Something that we did start off with our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Parent Committee. We've had a few meetings, not as many as I would like this year. Unfortunately, schedules get in the way. I have to look at the schedule for next year and see how we can get a better. We had three meetings? But I have 3. I have parents here that were on it. And I thank them. This is hard work, and I appreciated everyone's time to sit and have a conversation about some tough topics, and it's something that I do look forward to expanding next year and maybe looking at it a little differently. So that way I do thank the committee and appreciate the time that went into the meeting with me. We are redesigning our child study team. We're in the process of that now to better meet the needs of creating a through line through our school adjustment counselor with our child study team. We're going to be continuing with our town meetings next year with our students. That's our grade level meetings that we have. As I said, we changed it up a little bit, that our town meetings are going to be with our school adjustment counselors and our psychologists, and we also do it with our assistant principal. We go over school rules, we go over the bus rules, we go over the recess rules, we go over cafeteria rules. We have to continue teaching those throughout the course of the school year. We also, as I said, every other month we do an extra special, and the students are assigned to us, whether it be gym, art, music, and that gives the teachers in time during that town meeting time to have important professional development or team time. And we do that because, and you guys have town meeting too. Every grade level is different, and every grade level has its own unique set of things we have to do as far as rules on the playground and such. So this gives that individual time for each grade level.
So one of the projects that we've been engaged in, we wanted to talk about briefly tonight, and so this is a super rough draft right now of the grade 1 and 2 expectations, but we are working on updating the elementary report card specific to the areas that lay out the skills of, lay out the social skills, the emotional skills, and the learner behaviors that we're hoping our kids acquire by the end of their time with us. This is one of the areas where I think we have long felt we are a little all over the place, and we need to do a better job clearly articulating for everyone, for parents, for teachers, what it is that we're expecting and hoping for, what it is we're focusing on, what we're not focusing on as it relates to these skills. These skills are really the foundational skills for our kids. One good example is organization. We have 5 different approaches on one grade level in terms of what we're doing to teach kids to organize themselves. We need to be more consistent, more thoughtful, more planful, and sequential in how we approach teaching kids how to be organized and prepared for middle school when they leave the elementary complex. What does that look like in 5th grade? What does that look like in 4th grade? So what we're doing here, and you see spelled out here on this, is the beginning of our effort to spell out what those expectations are. Each of these expectations will have a rubric that will go along with it. Not a rubric like in a traditional sense where you'll have like 4 different scales, but a rubric that would say, what does organization look like in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade, that we would then share with parents. It would go along with the report card so everybody can be clear about what it is that we're aiming for and how it is that we're reporting on these categories.
Yep. So the process, this began shortly after the new year in January, and this came from our teachers. We had a group of teachers that met with Mr. Thompson and I January-ish. Really about what does this, we've said many times when we started working together that it doesn't matter what elementary school your child goes to, they're getting the same education. And our teachers are so thankful that we're working on this together as a complex, because it really doesn't matter. And they sat by grade level, they sat by teams. It started with teams of teachers from each school. Then it expanded to include all of the teachers at every grade level, meeting and really taking the time. The teachers really, took this task and really spent, the conversations were probably the richest I've heard, and it was mind-blowing. And this is like really at draft form, but we're going to be digging deeper into these rubrics because we want to make sure that we're being clear as to what this looks like. 1st grade doesn't look, as Mr. Thompson said, doesn't look like 5th grade, but it does need to look the same whether from MKG to HBB with whatever grade we're looking at. So this is 3 through 5 in the span. And they're not going to get graded. If you want to go to that slide, thank you. So what we're looking at, and again, draft. These are some proposed scoring categories that students aren't getting a number grade. They're not getting a letter grade. It's where are they? Are they at an independent level or with support or approaching the skill? These are just a few of the words that we've kind of tossed around. We are going to be holding a community forum this summer to further this conversation because families, we want to hear from families on their thoughts and, before we get to that report card gets on the report card. We do have learner behaviors on the report card now. We're just trying to make this a little bit more easier for families to understand in what we're doing and what we're looking at with our students.
So just the last part I just wanted to say about that community forum is we're hoping to hear from parents to help develop what that rubric looks like, to make sure that we're on the same page, with what we think is appropriate expectations in terms of organization, and those kinds of topics. So we're looking forward to this. And again, I just want to reiterate Mrs. White's point. This is a section of the report card we're hoping to use to report to parents what we see, how kids are doing. It's not so much about grading kids as it is about reporting and letting people know. Because at the end of the day, as a parent of 3 kids, these are the things that I care the most about. I do want my kids to be good readers and writers and mathematicians, but I really want to know, are they being a good kid? Are they working hard? Are they trying their hardest? Are they being respectful? Do they get along with other kids? Things like that. So that's what we're aiming for. I don't know if we should take questions at this point or keep going, Mr. Mobile.
People have questions. Jessica?
So as you're looking at implementing this rubric, have you thought about how to utilize it across the kind of trimester schedule? Because I know that's always something that can cause some confusion or can dishearten kids when they get like their term 1 report card and they're not meeting expectations, but it's because the skill isn't something they're expected to know till the end of the year. So are you looking at kind of adjusting, making sure that the rubric is covering kind of by trimester what those skills are, so they're not getting that confusion of a skill they're not expected to have yet?
That is a fantastic question, and we just haven't even gotten that far yet.
Okay.
But we actually were just talking about this just in relation to our report card in general, which we do believe needs to be updated, because I agree, our report card is end of the year standards, and that's the way we report on it, and I agree, it becomes really confusing, and I think we have oftentimes parents like, what does this mean? Like, that's an end of the year, I don't even know what you're saying to me right now sometimes. So I think we need to update it across the board, but that's a great question and goal, I think, for us. And part of the reason why we need to have a larger conversation.
Yeah.
Because we all look at it through one lens, but parents are looking at the report card through a completely different lens. It's like
And the students too, because I know the students really care when they look at it. I want it to make sense to them as well.
I agree.
Right, it can be deflating when they look at it that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Other questions?
Good evening. Excuse me. Thank you for having us here tonight. I do want to thank our my school council for this current year. Myself, Mrs. Bagnell, Mrs. Tullish, Mrs. Lord, and Mrs. Condry as our teachers, Mrs. Carol Carver, who's our community representative, and then Mrs. Treasure Gonzalez, who's one of our parents as well. They worked really hard this year, and ultimately what we ended up figuring out was that a lot of the things that were part of our school improvement plan really were not going to be accomplished in 1 year. And so a lot of our goals for next year are pretty similar to the current goals that we have for this current year, or that they build upon those. But I did want to review some of the things and highlight some of the things that we did do this year. I think one of the biggest things that we did this year was really introducing coaching cycles. We're very fortunate in having Mrs. Santos, who's our instructional coach, who has really fostered some great relationships in the building and really built some clout and sort of credo with our teachers. And having been a classroom teacher, she's just the right person for this position. And one of the things that she's helped organize was what we called learning walks. It's not technically learning walks, but it was an opportunity for teachers to visit other teachers' classrooms in very small groups and look for specific things. So a group of teachers wanted to look for support on interactive read-alouds. And so they would work with Mrs. Santos, they'd get together. She would go and find a teacher that would be willing to have those other teachers come into her classroom and observe an interactive read-aloud, then go with that teacher and have a debrief session where the teachers could ask questions about, well, how come you did this, and what did this look like, what were your, how did you plan this? And it worked really, really well in that the teachers that were hosting these were looking for feedback. So they not only were like looking at themselves as exemplars, but they were looking at, please come into my classroom because I want some feedback. And so part of the debriefing process was, tell me what you think I could have done differently. So it was a really nice give and take, and that to me is really important in the coaching aspect, and that's something we're going to continue to work on. We did do some inventory of the books in our book room. We looked at our literacy curriculum maps and some refinement of that, and that's certainly the work that's going to continue over the next year. We were pretty limited in our math PD. We did have some with Mrs. Stukenborg. She came to the school a few times and did some PD. And as Mrs. White has said, very well received by our teachers, very engaging professional development. Another big thing that we started this year was our PBIS team. As I've been, this is my third year finishing up as a principal at MEC, and the first couple years were kind of a mess with COVID. But one of the things that was clear is that, and I guess this is pretty historic at MEC, is that there are pockets of people doing their own sort of positive behavioral interventions and supports. And some people are using Second Step, some people are using bucket fillers, some people are using responsive classroom. And one of our goals for the next few years, and particularly being part of the PBIS team in the academy, is to really sort of streamline that so that we're all doing very consistent things across the school, and that allowing for teachers to have their autonomy in regard to their own sort of classroom reward systems, but having things that we can do across the board for the entire school. Part of that process is, and again with our PBIS team and with our teacher leaders, talking about sort of rebranding MEC in regard to our mascot or how we look at ourselves. And so we're looking at a few different ideas of what that looks like, and that will really strongly and closely tie into our PBIS system and our student recognition. We have continued to do social emotional learning lessons with our school adjustment counselor and our school psychologists, with the expectation that teachers have follow-up lessons that they can do on everything from frustration management and self-regulation and organization and all of those aspects of learner behaviors. We did partner with Calmer Choice this year. We hadn't the previous year. And then we also had introduced the social emotional screening for all of our students, and that was the teacher perception surveys. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but we will continue with a lot of the work that we started this year in regard to our goals. Big part of that will be our literacy and math curriculum writing and our vertical articulation teams. And I know that as a district, we've talked quite a bit about this year, and our goal is to really align what's happening from pre-K all the way through grade 12. And that's going to be a big part of what we're doing for the next few years. So we had a literacy goal, we have a math goal, and again, a sort of a inclusive environment for students, families, staff, and visitors. And a lot of these things will just continue for the next year. Looking forward to it.
Any questions?
Thank you, elementary principals. With that, we'll turn to the middle school and Heather Tucker to come and talk about school improvement for the middle school.
Good evening. I did have two school council members here, but I think it must have been time for children's bedtimes, and they did have to go. So I'm here to present the John T. Nichols Middle School School Improvement Plan, and what is important to know about this plan. It's not one that I wrote. It is one that had been in place, and we've had a couple school council meetings, so I am really thankful to Shelley Berard, Crystal Silva, Jody Jans Carlton, and then the teachers, Wendy Conant, Krista Medeiros, and Kathy Kubek, for continuing to support the work of the school council as there was a transition in leadership. And I think one of the things to really note is being really appreciative of the work of the Nichols Middle School to keep going, even though there was, a little bit of gap of consistent leadership. And I think that really speaks to the strengths, the talents, and the drive of the educators, the district supports, and the families. This school improvement plan, we did as a council revise to narrow it down. Previously, Each action step had about 10 or 13 steps underneath it, and that's actually quite a few action steps for a school council plan. So in discussion, we decided to narrow down the focus in order to be able to target our expectations to make sure that we were able to report on what is happening here at Nichols. Okay. The goal itself did not change, and actually a lot of the targets under the goal did not change, but it is to improve our instructional routines in order to better support student learning engagement and continuous achievement. So in collaboration with the curriculum and instruction, there's been a lot of focus on the evidence-based inclusive practices, particularly with a focus on Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions and supports for all learners. This type of discussion and the work is being done through the department head meetings. So the department heads all gather together to look at continuity and consistency across their curriculum departments. Once you enter a middle school, it is different from that of the elementary schools. Instead of having grade level teams, really we work in departments, and then also our cluster teams look a little bit more social emotionally at students, where the departments look more at that curricular instruction. Some of the things that are new is STAR 360 is a math and an ELA baseline measurement, and what we do is we look to see how students progress through a school year from the start of the year to the midpoint to towards the end, and right now we just opened up our STAR 360 benchmark assessment. This is a tool that I think we're able to explore to use even more effectively as a progress monitoring tool. I know the English department even had a department meeting today, and they were talking about the writing benchmark and the rubric, and to ensure we're able to look at student progress as students grow, hopefully over the rubric, measuring their writing for each of the 3 grade levels. One of the things that is something that I noticed that is really seems to be very well utilized is the tutoring program based on the grant funding that the Nichols Middle School had received. And there's tutoring on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays after school, which is when there's the late bus, and it is staffed with educators. And students are able to come in to complete work that they need help on, to get extra practice, to work with an educator on something they may be confused or just need some more time to help. And I'm actually working with those educators to actually identify how many students are coming, how many students are repeat students coming, just to look at the efficacy and efficiency of the program, because I understand that the grant itself does have a time limitation on it, but if the program is something that really is working to support students, particularly in those tiered interventions, it's something that I would recommend Nichols consider doing. The second goal is to promote and implement social emotional learning strategies into our students' school-wide experiences throughout the school year. And I know the target of the Nichols Middle School with the district has been to implement that mass-tiered system of support programs and supports to develop the whole student. I know there was a development of a PBIS committee. One of the things that seems to be very entrenched and important in the life of the Nichols Middle School is earning tiger stripes for when students are caught being good. I know that there was some partnership between the PBIS committee and the PTA to purchase a tiger mascot costume to help build some additional school support, which seems to be an exciting thing. And looking at the after-school enrichment. What I learned is we have ROAR Awards, and we are due for our next ROAR Award delivery to students, which we'll be putting names into the Tiger Times, not this week, but next week, because that will happen on May 23rd, 24th, the Wednesday. The staff have been receiving ongoing professional development in MTSS. Panorama is a new data collection tool that pulls in a variety of data sources that helps us to look at the efficacy and efficiency of our programming. And I know there's been some discussions around ensuring the continuity and consistency of how and what data is being entered into Panorama to make sure that that as a data source is really robust in helping us to assess our progress and growth and to see what our areas of need are. Our Character Strong has continued. The PBIS committee had identified 6th grade as empowerment, 7th grade as growth, and 8th grade as success as target terms, and setting expectations for students to progress and to try and continue to build that sort of gradual release of expectations of students as individuals and as learners in the context of the Nichols Middle School. The third goal has been to reestablish a school culture built on maintaining class, team, grade, and school-wide agreements and expectations that strengthen our community of learners and educators while building positive relationships within our school community. I know the previous principal had conducted surveys of parents, students, and staff, and the school council will be further analyzing that data to talk about what the school improvement plan goals for the following school year ought to be, just with some considerations. One of the things I think is really helpful, and I think is a great kudos to all of you sitting up there, is creating that 3rd, 6th grade team for the 23-24 school year. Class size really does impact how a community functions. Reallocating the social science unified arts teacher to a STEM position, and that's for the 23-24 school year, which is really important because it'll help address that curriculum content area. One of the things to note is in 8th grade, you're assessed on all 3 years of science standards, and it's important to actually give students that hands-on, more practical application of the science standards. And the Nichols is undergoing a schedule revision to increase time on learning and looking at reallocating the 2 homerooms and how the extension block time is utilized in order to promote more time on learning. Some of the fun and exciting things are the student council sitting in and listening to this group of students and their brainchild of how to make the Nichols School a better place is really impressive. The students really, with their thought process, their analyzation, what they see has been great, but they also look at the Spirit Weeks and have been planning. We have another Spirit Week that is to start next week on the 22nd. And there's been some discussions in the different departments and the different teams, department head meetings, and in, I think the school council itself is talking about how are we sort of calibrating our expectations of skill development across the 3 grade levels in planning what would look like a gradual release of skills from, say, the start of 6th grade to the end of 6th grade, and what does that look like? And where would 7th grade pick up to gradual release to 8th grade? So that way we're preparing students for the high school to be, autonomous learners and ready. The other thing that we have been discussing at Nichols Middle School is putting into writing what I've called the standard operating procedures, SOPs. There's a lot of practices that are really great but aren't necessarily in writing, so we've been working collaboratively across all of the different groups that I've mentioned throughout this plan to create a list of the standard operating procedures that actually should be memorialized in writing to build that continuity, to build that consistency, and that is something the educators have seemed to find really helpful, and it's something that Nichols is working on. But that is, wrong direction. Okay, so that's it for Nichols Middle School. Thank you very much.
Questions?
Oh, sure. Apologize.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll turn to the high school. And I'll call up Mr. Paul Brannigan to come and talk about his progress at the Middleborough High School and where we're headed into the year that awaits.
Hi everyone, good evening, and I'm really excited to be sharing with you just some of the highlights of our year and then also just some of the trajectory of where the high school will go in the upcoming year. You just note, I just want to take an opportunity the other principals have to be thanking the members of our school council at the high school, Heather Montross, who has been the chair, Sam Descharnes, Brianne Kesimian, who's here tonight, Cassandra Lemieux, Colleen Perillo, Joanne Salamone, Kendall Santos, who is our student rep, Bonnie Soul as a member of the committee. It has been really an unbelievable group to work with. Some of the highlights that I just want to share with the committee that I'm really quite proud of this year with our school is, first and foremost, was really our engagement in pre-AP strategies. That one of the goals for us as a school is to make sure that when we look at our leveling practices from our students who enroll in college preparatory, honors, or AP, the fact that if a student who starts in college prep, the fact that the bridges to go to honors to AP become seamless. And so it's not they have to climb to be able to get enroll in an AP course at some point during their journey. So these pre-AP strategies that we started to embed in grades 9 and 10 allows them to get a little bit of the skill set of really what an AP student is like. So if they decide and choose to go in that direction, that they have at least some skill behind them. Our redesign of our freshman academy that we launched last summer and implemented this fall has really been something about really what does it look like in a classroom, and really what do we want for our students to be, and really what are those skills we want students to know. But also one of the things that I want to thank Dr. Michaelides is really the creation of vertical teams between the middle and the high school. This has really been something that is new for us, that has been really so welcomed. In watching and being a part of some of the professional development over the course of this year, watching the middle school teachers and the high school teachers really talking about really what they're doing and what the two schools are doing, and to ensure the fact that the strategies and the skills students are learning are really just flowing from grade to grade, and that beginning of that work is so important. I challenged all of our content areas to engage in a 3-year strategic plan for each content area. What I mean by that is that especially coming into this new school is really no longer do we have limitations. So I really wanted them to start to be thinking about really where do you see your content area in 3 years? What does history and social studies look like 3 years from now? What does English look like? What does science and a STEM program look like? And that these strategic plans have been really exciting because it's really been a nice launch for our work with our NEASC preparation, which I'll share with you in just a moment. The implementation of Panorama, and what this has done for us as a school is to be able to really get a snapshot of really where our students are at. We're able to be looking at where they are from an academic standpoint, from a behavioral standpoint, and then really from us as a group of adults to be able to say, right, what are the next steps? What do our students need at this time? And the data is so real, and that has been something I've been really happy with, seeing the beginning stages of really looking at our use of Panorama. But then also our restructuring our child study team. And I really want to thank people like Mr. Dizell, Mr. Avatabli, and Ms. Bowen, because that team has really begun the process of really restructuring the engagement of teacher voice around the table, really looking at our child study team, which really begins to look at really how do we support students in moments in time where they need it the most. And really just a lot of the professional development this year on trauma-informed classrooms, of really looking at strategies of really identifying our students that are coming into our school that maybe have had an impact of trauma, and what does that look like, and what are the signs that are there that we may not be seeing, and to be able to allow them to be able to take those strategies and then embed that into really their engagement in the classroom. But also, too, our use of tiered interventions. Really, what are those simple strategies that teachers can be doing in really a tier 1? For example, something as simple as standing at the door as the students come in and students leave. The research shows the fact it is tremendous success of really students walking into a room knowing that someone is greeting them at the door each and every day. It may sound very simple, but it's these simple strategies for us to make sure that teachers can have refilling this toolbox, which we really felt that this level had been somewhat depleted with the experience of the pandemic. One of the things that I'm so excited by is really just our relaunch of the Family Strong program. As you know, the high school doesn't have a formal PTA, and it really became something as really bringing parents together to talk about really what do they see in their high school students. And this really relaunch of the Family Strong program has allowed to bring professionals into our school to talk about issues that our families at this level are really facing in terms of mental health in particular, and we're really excited about where that program will go over the next year. What we just learned over, which has been something we've been working towards for the year, we just learned back at the end of March, early April, that we are one of the brand new schools to be entered into an innovative pathway school through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And we were given the designation as a school for manufacturing. And really a special thanks to Tony Cupie for really being the real kind of captain of this ship to get this designation by the state. And it really allows for us to make sure the fact that we can engage students into some technical courses as well, and really the real full use of the Innovation Lab. And the last three things you see have been a body of work over the last many years, and it's really come to our fruition. The vision of the graduate, well, first I want to do the Future Ready program, I'm sorry. The Future Ready program has been something that we have been talking about at this level for at least 2 years, and it's finally in a place where we will launch. Our kickoff will happen on June 14th. We'll be inviting community stakeholders from in our community and alum to come in and really talk about in a think tank is really what do our employers look for in students or employers when they are hiring. And one of the things we're hoping to do is to really create the word relevance in our classes. You hear all the time the word rigor, and now we have to bring in the word relevance, because when you're teaching students content areas and topics, why do they need to be learning this? Why are they doing these projects in a classroom? And then be able to make sure that the skills that they're learning become transferable into really a potential employment. In this Future Ready program that we will launch starting in September, really excited by, and I'm really excited to bring it to all of you at some point to really share the tenets of it. But it's really going to be taking, when you hear concept of college and career ready, that is a wonderful thing, but we're also finding the fact that it creates a pathway. Either you're college ready or you're career ready, but you can't be both. And that really the changing of our vocabulary away from really this college career readiness piece to really making all of our students future ready. It doesn't matter what their pathways are going to be. They can step into the world and be ready to go. And it starts this spring. Our vision of the graduate has been a body of work we started in 2020, and I want to thank the school district for really allowing a high school project to become really a district-wide project. This vision of the graduate is really our body of work to say that all of our students, when they enter this building, what is the vision that they have? What do we have for those students when they graduate? And ultimately, what I'm so excited by is this has now become a district initiative. So the vision of a graduate begins the moment that the youngest of our students enter the school system. And we'll be sharing more of that out as we go. We've had some unbelievable work as a team, as a faculty at the high school this year, are really looking at really what this vision is that we want for our graduates. Our self-reflection is close to done as part of our checkoff for NEASC. As you know, in 2025, we'll go through our decennial visit for our reaccreditation, and they've changed the construct of it. And this self-reflection has been a body of work that our teachers have been working on for the last year, collecting evidence through the 5 standards of NEASC, and that we will be completing this process throughout the summer as we get ready for our collaborative consult visit, which is the first stage of our accreditation in November. And lastly, as you know, we'll be launching a brand new schedule for the high school in the fall, and that this monster of a task is close to completion, and we're really quite proud of the body of work that it's become. And really just the goals and focus through our work this year, through a lot of our NEAS data, that for many of our families and students that we launched back in the fall, a really comprehensive survey that went out to all teachers, students, and families. And all the questions are very similar to each other, but asked from the lens in which they were. And a lot of these particular goals really come out of that. One looking at is our instructional practices. We realize at the high school the fact that the strategies that we have been employing, many of them are tried and true, but we also know the fact that we need to sharpen the tools of really making our instructional practices really truly relevant. You see the work we've been doing in curriculum, especially with the anticipation of a new schedule, of really looking at our assessment practices and so on. The relevance piece, cross-curricular, project-based learning, and what I really like to call a deeper shift in practice, which is really looking at the strategies that we're using each and every day in our classrooms, and really how do we make sure that our students become engaged the moment they walk in the door. Our school culture piece, looking at the revamping again, because it's a body of work that will keep going, is our freshman academy. The look at our advisory, we're really excited by the 18 advisories we'll offer next year that will become really part of the foundational work of our Future Ready program. level of engagement in all classrooms, and what I call the 3 A's, the activities, the athletics, and the arts, of really putting some energy into those 3 areas, making sure we're building leadership skills into all 3 arenas for students who say they're leaders. What does leadership truly mean? Looking at wellness, and of course our ongoing work of the sense of belonging. Our Future Ready program, that college career readiness, I have that language in there, but again, this whole concept of being future ready. Our MyCap training that we have had a team of us working on this all year, and it's quite exciting work of really having students really begin to learn how their academic work plays into their career readiness, and also the whole concept of innovation. The vision of the graduate, its implementation, its collaborative consult, and the next steps from that. And lastly, we thought it was important as a school council to make sure that we had the goal of the new high school scheduled in full focus, as it will be something that we will need to analyze and to assess in the upcoming year to make sure it's truly meeting the needs of our students. I can take any questions you may have.
Questions for Paul?
A quick one. The NEASC evaluation.
Sure.
What's the, once you finally get it done, when's the next one start?
Right, so every 10 years, we should have had our visit in this year in 2023, but because of COVID, all the schools got moved out. So we're actually our accreditation will happen in October of 2025. But what they've done is they've changed the entire process. So what we're preparing for now is really the completion of our self-reflection, which is a document where we as a faculty identify where we fall into those 5 standards. Are we progressing? Are we meeting the expectation? Are we exceeding the expectation of that particular standard? Then what will happen is that a team from NEASC, which is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, will come here to Middleborough and they will analyze our self-reflection. They will either say to us, you're right on point, you're honest about where you're at, or you know what, you were too hard on yourself, or you know what, you really need to take a deeper dive into that area. And then they will give us the springboard, and that springboard will take us from this November to 2025. The idea is the fact that instead of the old NEASC way, which was they told us what we needed to be doing, now they meet us where we're at. We're identifying what we're good at, what we're not, and what we need work on. And then really they hold us accountable for meeting those goals when they come back in 2025. From there, it'll be another 10 years after that.
So you get to take a breath in 2025?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Yep.
Hold on, it'll come.
Correct. So just to reiterate, so the kickoff meeting for the stakeholders for the Future Ready program, you had a date for that? Do you have a time for that?
Yeah, so the date is June 14th, and we're just finalizing the invitations that will be going out. And the stakeholders are all the stakeholders that we have used historically through the senior internship program, which there are many. And then also the new pathways and new partnerships that have been forged and created through the innovation lab here at the high school. And it's also working with the Sachem Pride Alumni Foundation to bring all of those people together to really talk about really what do employers look for in their future of their employees. So more to come on that.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bradigan. Actually, I'm going to have you stay and not go back to your seat, which you're doing anyway. But I would invite the principals up just to the table as I move into this last item. As I get into, actually, once you put up my slide deck, we're going to be discussing ongoing progress on bullying and intervention, our bullying prevention and intervention procedure here in the district. While I wait for those slides, what I wanted to start by saying was that it was the meeting in April, it was April 13th when I presented my entry plan of findings and really identified this area as an area of critical need for our district. Recall that the entry plan identifies, trends and items that we have to address as soon as possible, but doesn't necessarily propose complete solutions. And that's because solutions need to come from not just process, but consultation. So I'm calling this presentation this evening part 1 of 2, so that I can go through what has been the ongoing work, but also what work needs to be done still. So with that, I will turn into just a brief history of what has been going on for the last few years in this domain. In August of 2020, This was the last time the district had a review of its bullying prevention and intervention plan. And it's important to know what was happening in August of 2020 because that was when schools were reopening. So that is why you wouldn't have seen the same level of engagement that I'm about to go through here this evening. That said, there was still ongoing work that I'll go through here. In November of 2020, Houston Kraft actually came from Character Strong and presented on his book, Deep Kindness, but also Character Strong, which is one of the pieces of how this district has addressed character development and bullying prevention across multiple levels here in the district. Beginning in the school year of 2020, there have been ongoing building-based initiatives directly related to students. When I get to the next slide, I'll break down what initiatives have been going on at each level so that you can, those of you who are parents are saying, okay, I remember hearing about that, and tying the connection between what was going on and how that relates to bullying prevention. In January of 2021, there was updated professional development that was provided to all staff and actually is listed on the website. But that marked a shift in updating information that we were giving, not just to families and students, but also our educators, because training of educators in this domain is also important. In addition, there was more Character Strong professional development. We had school-wide presentations and district-wide presentations over the last few years with Character Strong. And then beginning in this school year, the 22-23 school year, we began the process of identifying concerns and areas of improvement for the district, specifically in the areas of bullying prevention and intervention. It also included a review of the bullying prevention and intervention plan, which is in draft mode. So the building approach to this work involves really looking at how you unpack how to work with kids and how to work with staff on this issue. At the elementary schools, they used the character word of the week. If you ever remember hearing about these units, this is an initiative directed at student behavior. Purposeful People, which is actually curriculum associated with the Character Strong program, used in all 3 elementary schools, and then positive behavior expectations as well. You heard the principals present tonight on tiered systems of approach through PBIS or positive behavioral intervention systems. These are also methodologies that are used to address behavior at the student level. Moving into the high school, there are several approaches to how to address behavior that include Tiger Stripes, which is awarding students for positive behavior. Boston versus Bullies, which is a bullying prevention program that's presented by the Sports Museum and the Boston sports community to kind of take a stand against bullying. That's an initiative that you'll see at the Nichols Middle School. Character Strong, which is alive and well at both actually it's at all of our buildings, but middle school is where it really takes shape and continues that work at the high school level. Middle school also engaged guest speakers and presentations to specifically promote a positive school environment. When I turned to the high school, I wanted to highlight the Student Strong Awards, which again is a similar concept to the Tiger Stripes program, the Character Strong programming that's unrolled here, tiered intervention through PBIS, and lastly, the advisory block at that high school. If you ever hear your students talk about what they're doing in advisory, that's team and relationship building, which is really that prevention side of bullying prevention and intervention. To talk a little bit about what's been going on this year, I've created this timeline along with the help of Kevin Avatable, who couldn't be here this evening. In December of 2022, this was where we really mapped out the next steps as to how we would tackle this issue. And it began with conversation at leadership team meetings and some honest and earnest introspection about what was facing our students and how we were tackling it as an administrative team. In January of 2023, the Director of Student Services organized an administrative PLC to review the plan and begin working on updates. In February of 2023, there was research conducted in the area of bullying intervention plans to determine what curriculums were being used locally and around the state. At that time, Kevin Avatable also spoke with Mark Bullying at Bridgewater State University to determine some resources regarding a curriculum that we might be considering onboarding here at the district. and then a review of additional trainings in PD for students and staff. In March of 2023, that plan, the draft plan, has been updated and presented to the principals for their review. And the reason it has to be done that way is because this is something that is a very building-based initiative. And it really can't be done as a central office team and dispensed. This is something that has to be owned, acknowledged, and absorbed by each of the 5 buildings. The principals have, in March, started to provide feedback on the plan. Continuing into April, as I referenced earlier, the entry plan of findings identified this plan as an area of concern. And in May, here tonight, presenting the work that we've done and the future work that we will do. So in June, coming very soon, there will be community feedback, culminating in a community feedback session on June 20th at 5 p.m. And that feedback is sought to help finalize the district plan and get it out of draft mode so that by summer of 2023, a new plan will be finalized with administrative and community input, with a rollout plan with commitment for training and resources before we start the next school year. There are some threshold issues that through these conversations and research are important to note. The first one is how bullying is defined is a pretty significant threshold issue. These are terms that are legally defined, but that doesn't mean that A, it doesn't happen, or that B, it doesn't need to be addressed. And regardless whether a behavior is termed or found to be bullying or not, still may and more likely will warrant some type of response. Properly identifying bullying remains a concern. The principals have provided robust feedback. All schools report an overrepresentation of what bullying is and is not. That said, I am not of the mind, and I don't believe anybody else is, that all incidences of bullying are being reported. And so you have a double-ended issue. You have to make sure that it isn't overrepresented, and you want to make sure for particularly students that would otherwise remain silent, there are vehicles for getting that information out. It's important to note that not all conflict is bullying. And so Kevin provided key elements here, and this is going to kind of form the basis of that community forum and stakeholder feedback next month. So I'm not going to go through all the elements of bullying, only because I think that that conversation is needed at a more substantial level. And regardless, when bullying has occurred and has been substantiated, effective intervention is needed. So those are threshold issues. I also wanted to share, there was an email that went around, I think it was maybe in March, if not February, where the district was seeking input and sharing with families about how discipline laws have changed at the state level. I offer it here because how the progression of what's happened in discipline law has changed and impacted how districts respond to student behavior. Schools must take additional steps to re-engage students before using suspension and expulsion as disciplinary measures. So when the Massachusetts legislature amended MGL 7137H and 3/4, it includes now subsection B, that has new language relevant to student discipline. And now that language indicates that before suspending or expelling schools must consider ways to re-engage the student, and in certain circumstances, implement alternative remedies. Effectively, what the state is saying through the changes in this law is that suspension and expulsion, though available, is becoming less available and in more limited fashions. So if you're sitting and thinking, well, what happens if there's bullying? Can you take action? The answer is yes. But I offer this information because it gives context for the climate in which that we will be addressing it. Efforts for re-engagement for students could look like many different forms. It could include restorative practices like educational opportunities, like reflective practices, like community services. So it's important to know, well, what does that mean? What is that re-engagement? If the student isn't going to be suspended, what might those behaviors or steps to take look like? The laws ultimately dictate, to some degree, our response and what we're able to do, but particularly with respect to student disciplinary measures. Then finally, we can never share what is actually done to the other party. And I know this is a sticking point and an area of concern for many families. When there is a conflict, whether it's bullying or not, there is a strong desire to know what's going to happen. And there is a limited sense of ability in what can be shared. So with that said, I want to talk a little bit about our role and what our district plan, will include and what we've sort of already seen. What was interesting is we saw a decline in the 1920 and 2021 school years in behaviors and incidents. But I don't think that the decline in behavior was because there were no problems. There was a lot going on in our schools during COVID. There was social distancing. There were a lot of reasons why behaviors decreased. You actually saw that statistic over the state. It wasn't unique to Middleborough. And unsurprisingly, as schools have returned, so have behaviors, because students are now together again and engaging, now. And it wasn't that anything had been solved during those years more than it was really just masked. It's necessary to offer vehicles for community input as we move forward, in part to make sure we're all talking the same language and understanding the terms in a similar fashion. As educators, what we identified is that we need to develop a system that responds with urgency to these reports so that they're managed in a timely fashion. We also will be looking at identifying a challenging and engaging age-appropriate curriculum that meets the needs of Middleborough. So we had that conversation with Mark, which is an acronym, but I don't know what the acronym stands for at this moment in time. Mark is widely used across the state, but that doesn't mean that we'll just adopt Mark and that will be the end of it. Mr. Thompson has talked a little bit about how his building has used pieces of that curriculum and supplemented with other pieces of curriculum that have been useful to his building. This is exactly the type of conversation we want to be having across all 5 buildings, so that what we're creating is specific to the needs here in this district. We want to create those open discussions with families and students and increase professional development and training for our teachers and administrators. There are also structural changes that are needed, including adding staff presence where students are most vulnerable. That includes areas like hallways, like the cafeteria, at recess. Some schedule changes will accomplish this at the secondary level. You heard Mrs. Tucker talk about an impending change in the schedule at the middle school, and you heard Mr. Brannigan talk about a change in schedule at the high school. And we're confident that those changes will result in a positive impact. Additionally, we want to look at emphasis on early intervention in grades pre-K through 5, so that this is not something that kind of crops up in the middle of, secondary education, but is a running thread throughout our district. We want to increase our restorative practices and knowledge on intervening with students so that we have a robust toolkit for how to engage. We also want to ensure appropriate reporting and investigations are taking place and documented. So some of the things we've talked about are developing a district drive to house reports so that we can track all of the incidents in one spot to help determine if it meets that threshold of bullying. An effort to really align practices and analysis, to take some of that subjective guesswork out of, really what amounts to an analysis. And then lastly, reviewing methods for parents, students, and staff to report bullying. We've heard that be articulated before in this meeting here with what's the most effective way to report that? What does it look like? Is it user-friendly? Is it something that leads to a timely response? So we do need that community feedback on what our families would prefer. So I talked about it a little bit earlier, but what's coming in June of 2023 is this community forum to discuss the bullying intervention and prevention draft plan. This plan is going to be posted on our website on June 8th. And we'll be looking for the community to review that plan prior to the June 20th community forum. That way you can come with specific feedback. I am concerned about this part, or I like this part, or have you thought about this part? That forum will take place at 5 p.m. in the Nichols Middle School Library, and we will use that input before finalizing our plan. It would be at that point over the summer where I'd come back to give you an update on where this stands. The last item and final thoughts really involves a whole child approach to tackling this particular issue. All adults in a child's life, regardless of the role that they play a part in preventing and responding to bullying behaviors. What we know is that these behaviors don't just happen at school. They don't just happen on the field. You know, they happen across the life of a child. Validating a child's experience and modeling positive responses dramatically changes the outcome for children who either bully or have been bullied. The difference between positive and negative mental health outcomes for students who bully or have been bullied are largely affected by levels of adult support. So it's particularly crucial that however we respond is effective for children. Understanding that we all play a role in how children treat each other helps support a positive community and one that we all want to belong. And then lastly, bullying requires a comprehensive and collaborative response inside and outside of school settings. True bullying is pervasive. By definition, it's pervasive, and can and likely does spread to outside areas of the school, which is one of the reasons cyberbullying is now included in the definition of bullying. Without community support, the problem simply can't be solved. So with that, we'll take questions, and if you have questions about the process or a specific building, I think that would be helpful to just specify.
In terms of looking at staffing in the spaces that are considered problematic, I know that there were issues raised at a previous meeting about the bathrooms. So is that on the list of areas to evaluate?
Yes, so one of the major changes, and Mr. Brannigan, you can speak to this if you want, but one of the major changes at the high school schedule was to better provide supervision at times like lunch and bathrooms to include duties. So that these spaces, I mean, that doesn't mean someone's like standing in the bathroom, just to be perfectly clear. But right now, without a mechanism to do that, it's, you know, it provides opportunity for student behavior to go unchecked or unnoticed. So there have been efforts at both the high school schedule committee and the middle school scheduling process to tackle those specifically.
Okay, I have two other things. You mentioned that it's very difficult to kind of balance the I want to know what action's being taken and the law. So out of this forum and everything, I know with your communication plan, you've tried to establish what transparent communication can be versus cannot. So I think that would be an important piece to come out of this is what could you actually expect to be told versus specifics as to what you could not be told, just so that people have awareness of what those expectations are. And then the other piece in terms of expectations is if behavior is deemed to not meet bullying criteria, what are the next steps then? Because obviously there are still aggrieved parties and there is still discord to handle. So what are the steps if it doesn't get evaluated as bullying by whatever the new policies and everything are, but what are then the steps that are taken to handle those situations as well?
Yes, this is an area that's been identified by the team. You know, whether there's a bullying investigation, it shouldn't end the inquiry. Oh, there's no bullying, ergo there's no problem. It should be that whether it's termed to be bullying or not, there's still a response. What are we going to do about that? What does that conversation look like? What is the restorative practice?
And what are the communication expectations to parents as well in that instance?
Yep, thank you.
Go right ahead.
Hi. So a couple things. I just want to say that no matter what type of plan is developed, it's only as good as the execution. It's only as good as the people that can carry it out. You can put whatever you want in writing. If it's not followed, doesn't matter. And that's what's been happening. So another thing I want to say is that the bathrooms are a huge problem. And I want it to be looked into is how much money is being spent to repair the damage that students are doing in the bathroom, particularly at Nichols Middle School. Because I understand a plumber had to be brought in for a pipe that was kicked off in an 8th grade bathroom. These behaviors cannot continue. And I think part of it is that nobody is held accountable for their behaviors. They're not. It's a slap on the wrist because of this new whole no suspension, no keep learning. it's not always the kids that show that they're getting bad grades and things that are doing this stuff. It's kids that are maybe excelling in other areas and are kind of allowed to just float around as they want and do what they want because maybe they're a sports star or maybe they get great grades, and it's not okay. This bullying goes, it spans all educational, it expands everything. So I think really we have to relook at how are we identifying these bullies. Yeah, they're a good kid. Their parents say they're a good kid. The teachers say they're a good kid, but they're choosing to bully somebody. It's not okay. And I want to also focus on, yes, you're restoring the bully and restoring behavior and trying to implement better behaviors, but what's being done to make those targets, those victims feel safe? Because I know that they don't feel safe. I'm told a lot that people don't feel safe. And if part of Middleborough Public Schools is to provide a safe educational opportunity for all students, that's not happening. We need to do better. I would also like something looked at for the bathrooms to a better monitoring system. Because yes, you can hire staff, but if that staff get called away for other things, there's nobody to monitor the bathrooms. It's kind of a secondary situation. So I think they use the e-hall pass, which is limiting because it times out at 30 minutes. So if people aren't checking themselves back in and the teacher doesn't check them back in, you don't know when they came back. So I think there needs to be some type of scanning system for the bathrooms to determine where these children are going. Because once they get an e-hall pass, technically they can go where they want. They're not supposed to, but technically they can. So we need to really determine, okay, what bathroom were you in? What vandalism is being done in this bathroom? How many ceiling tiles are being taken off today and defecated on? How many calculators or food items need to be put on the toilets so kids can't use the toilets? We need to address those issues. What's happening is these behaviors are going unaddressed. They are inciting kids to ramp it up, to let's see what we can do next. Let's see how we can escalate this. And that's what's happening. You're having these escalating issues. It's out of control. It's not safe. I mean, beyond anything else that's going on there, this needs to be addressed. It's not a safe place to be. Whether they need recess or something to burn off some excess energy, I don't know. More learning time to me I get that morning time is very loose with the extra homeroom. Maybe add in some time that they can go run a lap around the school, burn off some of that energy that they're using kicking pipes off the wall. So I really think that this plan needs to look at bullying, but it also needs to look at particular behaviors that are out of control. Thank you.
So if I could just respond to that, and I would also like Mrs. Tucker to respond to that. I don't agree that there is no accountability at the Nichols Middle School. An example of that, you had referenced damage to the bathroom. And families are now being billed for damage that's occurring at the Nichols Middle School bathrooms. I approved the drafting of an invoice because I agree with you, if a child is in a bathroom and doing something that warrants that we have to bring in personnel to repair, it stands only to reason that that expense should not be borne by the district. So I wanted to start with that's something that's new and is occurring. And I know that, Mrs. Tucker will speak a little bit about some of the changes that are occurring. What I can tell you is the situation did not become this way overnight.
Nope.
And it is not going to be fixed overnight. So I think having collaboration with the building principal to allow her to, really start to put in systems of accountability would go a long way. So with that, Mrs. Tucker, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing at the middle school, I think that might be helpful.
So like you said, the Nichols didn't end up this way overnight. It's been like this for quite some time. I think it's fair to say you spoke to that in your entry plan. I think the surveys that were sent out by the previous principal spoke to the fact that the Nichols School is a place that has been considered out of control. Feedback from families has been seeking stronger discipline, stronger consequences, stronger responses, and that there needs to be rules, consistency, and expectations that are held firm. With that, I know prior to me coming, the principalship had decided to change lunches because one grade level altogether in the lunch was too much. So there was a plan that was discussed and I believe presented to the PTA in February about changing grade level lunches to mix the grades in order to separate some of the clusters of students who were not interacting appropriately. And yes, I talked about this. We talked about this at PTA.
Not in February.
Not in February, this
No.
past one though.
Yep.
Because I have found that if we aren't labeling to the marked degree that these unacceptable behaviors are occurring, this is more than just students being students. This is targeted destruction of the building. This is, by some students, flagrant disregard for any rules. I do have to say that between myself and the assistant principals, we have been calling parents, we've been asking families to come in. There are some places where we have some students who are pervasive lunch tables that are, I'll call it, there are some pervasive tables that are being more destructive, such as a group that ripped a bench off the cafeteria table. That's one that I know we have an invoice for and will be going to families of the students. There are some students that are just constantly touching, pushing, shoving, this, that, every other thing, and just aren't in self-control. And when you separate them and try and move them, they're still trying to reach one another. Those are still within more of a minor, because it's more fooling around, but what ends up happening is somebody falls off the bench, somebody this. The food throwing is definitely a problem. Somebody threw an apple and hit a child and she bruised 2 weeks ago. And the thing is, if you say remove just the students, I did go through the cafeteria about a week ago with a clipboard to try and get the names of the students at the pervasive tables. Because me coming into this school, I haven't been here 8 weeks yet. So I've not memorized all 702 students, the 200 staff, plus the rest of you. That's over 1,000 people that I can't memorize in 7 weeks. It's just not feasible. So I did take class lists into the cafeteria and I started writing names down because I need to be able to address the students who are sitting at the chronic tables. Now I'm starting with the families of the students who are more destructive versus more horsing around, because we have to start more pervasively. One of the things that we have done that the Nichols Middle School started prior to me coming is actually taking somebody and staffing what's a lunch detention, and that's an administrative lunch detention. That is somebody who is not making those great choices in the cafeteria, and we are removing them from the cafeteria. And some students are learning quick. Some students don't like it, and it happens fast. And students in middle school are allowed to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. We are not calling a parent every time there is a small or minor issue. But for the students who are receiving lunch detention repetitiously or seem to be multiple days in a row, we are calling those families. And one of the things I really have to say thank you to the community, because the families that we are bringing in to engage in discussions around their student behavior has been phenomenal. Their parents say, no, in my house, we do not throw food on the floor. We do not push our family member or a friend onto the floor. We do not flick food at the ceilings. That is not acceptable in my house, and that should not be acceptable at school. So I first and foremost want to say thank you to the families who are supporting us and are engaging in these really robust conversations. The other thing that I think we have more, I'm calling it whack-a-mole right now because there are so many different things that are popping up across the school. The three of us are nonstop, which is fine, because I do think we are starting to make some changes in the feel of the building. And I know it's really hard to measure a feel, but I have families saying to us, it feels different. Or somebody who hasn't been in the building, who's been in the building before, says, wow, it feels different. We are looking for students to be walking in the hallway, not jumping up and down. Keep your feet on the floor, those different parts and pieces. But with regard to
the bathrooms, we did hire an ESP for our in-school suspension. That hire was prior to my coming on board. But if that person has a student in school suspension, and we don't have somebody there every day, so I think that's important to note, but we are utilizing that person, and that does exist because we are addressing behaviors in that manner. But that's coming after we have tried to do some of those other restorative approaches. Suspending a student right off the bat, especially at middle school, is not the way to teach behavior. It is not the way. We need to find the consequence and the repair to try and build the understanding and the skill set. And with that, we do different types of investigations. And in conversations with some parents, I agree, we miss what I'm calling closing the loop at times, because we get a report and we get into investigation mode, and sometimes it takes time. If we are looking at a day's worth of camera video to see who enters, say, the 7th grade C cluster bathroom, that has the art room right across from it. It is in a central main hallway. You have a lot of students coming in and out, and to look at 8 hours worth of tape to see who came in, who's the student. If I don't know, asking one of the assistant principals. If they don't know, we need to get a UA teacher. Like, it takes time, which is fine, and we don't mind taking the time to do that. But what we need to be able to do, and it's something that actually we've started in the past few weeks and hearing feedback of, but we don't know what happens next. No, we cannot tell you what happens next, but what we can tell you is with an email of, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We have investigated it and it has been addressed. Because I think that's a fair piece of closure to know that something has been done, even though we can't tell you the who or the what, but at least lets you know that we have completed an investigation and we've had addressed it. And I think that's fair. I understand that families are looking for this type of information. That's fair. I was going with the ISS person. We've been strategically placing that person outside different bathrooms to be able to monitor that. So there are a lot of things that need to happen in the continuity and consistency, but we cannot do this alone. Nichols cannot do this alone, and I have been making a call to action to school council, to PTA, and I'm doing it to the community now in this public forum. We are asking for your help to engage in conversations with your students about expected school behavior, because this is greater than just kids being kids. This is an environment that, if in the cafeteria of almost 300 students, we need people to stop talking so an administrator or a staff member can stop the conversation so we could safely evacuate you. And I can't tell you right now, if I were to get into second lunch and speak on the microphone, that every student would stop speaking. I can pretty much guarantee you only 50% of that cafeteria at that time would stop speaking. So if there was a fire, I'd be concerned about getting your students out safely, because students' level of what is acceptable behavior is not something I think any person in this room or listening would allow to happen in their homes at all. And I am calling to action your support to have conversations with students about what is acceptable behavior. There shouldn't be running, there shouldn't be pushing, there shouldn't be throwing food. And when I'm talking about families of names that I collected on that Monday, I probably have 50 names. 50 names of students who are sitting at pervasively challenged lunch tables. That is not enough that we can take and put into our 10-person in-school suspension lunch. It's just not enough. We can't do that. And the other thing is, I actually went around and I have a list of 200 names of students that I'm trying to send those emails to those families to let those families know that it is not your child. Because I took every name of all 700 students and what lunch they sat at, and I was ready to take my weekend to do assigned seating, and I said, that's wrong. Why am I punishing hundreds of other students for about 50? That's not fair, and that's not appropriate, and that's where I'm engaging in conversations with families. And again, I cannot thank the families enough for their support, for their collaboration, and for their willingness to come in and have open, honest conversations about what we need to do to make this a safe place to learn. Sorry, that was my soapbox. I apologize.
I just want to add, my intention here is not to push this on Ms. Tucker. She has not been here very long. This problem has been going on for far too long. So the school district as a whole has failed the students of Nichols Middle School. absolutely failed. That place is seen as just a lost cause, honestly. And I think that district resources need to be put into helping what they're trying to do there, what changes they're trying to make. It has to be done. It's too much for 3 people to take on. You have to stop putting a Band-Aid on things and actually fix the problem, which they're trying to do, I understand that, but 3 people can't do it alone. This has been an ongoing problem for years. And what's gonna happen if she isn't the principal that you choose? We start all over again in the fall. I have a kid there that's had the worst experience there, as a 7th grader. Horrible. I would have pulled him. Horrible. It's not okay to just say, we're almost done with the school year. To what? To what end? Okay? Not okay. And I think communication has to happen. I had no idea parents were being invoiced for that. I understand you can't tell the behavior, say who it was, but we should know that kids are being held accountable for that. We should know that it's not being put on the school district. We should be told that, you know what, and kids should be told that, because then, you know what, it may actually stop some of those behaviors. This is part of the problem, is the accountability, is the communication. It's just not there, and it really needs to improve.
So I have some very similar concerns to this woman who I just met for the first time last school committee meeting, and I'm really going to reiterate pretty much what she said. But I first want to address what the principal just said. And I think we really need to start at the middle school with respecting our students first. So if you come in and you do not earn the respect of the students or their trust, you will be working against the tide. And so when you come in disrespectful, that's where they're not working towards a common good. They're not. And so even when you have children who are good kids, who apparently are sitting at bad tables, but it sounds like all the tables are bad, where would you like them to sit? Where is their proximity that is now causing them to be the problem? So now they're not just guilty of wrongdoing, they're guilty of sitting near somebody who's doing something wrong. And I will start by saying no child is responsible for the behavior of another child. They can engage in modeling and influencing, and they can try to be a good student, but that's not their responsibility. They are not responsible for the actions of another child. So that's where we need to start. We need to start building trust of children and families through respect, and that includes respect from adults to children. We've talked a lot about modeling behavior, and modeling behavior. And you know what I've seen? I see really poor modeling of behavior from adults. And that includes school committee members who choose to cyberbully people. So we have people who like to get online. They like to bully that way. We have people who like to share confidential emails with their spouses, with other people in the community. When people come to the community or come to the school committee with a concern, it is part of public record, but there's a way to access that public record. And it is not through school committee members forwarding it to other people in the community while laughing with their own comment, mocking families who bring concerns to school committee members. So we need to start with the adults who are not modeling proper behavior. And you are not going to see change if that continues to be allowed. So, sorry. And that goes for our former school committee members who like to take to their social media platform and post things about parents who disagree with them because they don't have constructive dialogue. So they take to a monologue and they like to just go on and bully and cyberbully parents who have concerns, who bring them forward in proper mechanisms. So these school committee members, whether they be former or present, are not engaging in the modeling behavior that we want our children to demonstrate. So we're going to start there with the modeling. I hear a lot about modeling. So that's an issue for me. The handbook needs to be gone over, I mean, with a fine-tooth comb. You have things in here that says retaliation is not tolerated. It's empty words. There's nothing behind that. What does that mean? Retaliation is tolerated. It is. And if it isn't, there's nothing in the handbook that says if you retaliate, this is what happens. So you need to strengthen your language in your handbook because retaliation is happening. The consequences of bullying, harassment, sexual harassment are completely left out of the code of conduct. So that means you can do 0 consequences, theoretically, 0. There needs to be a really clear designated person who's talking to these children when they are investigating them. This is an issue. It can't just be any random person. These people need to be skilled at these conversations, these investigations. You can't just allow any staff member to just conduct it because they're not skilled. They're not gathering the right information, or they're inappropriate in what they're doing or suggesting as a resolution to the child. Victims do need visible and tangible support. It doesn't mean you have to tell us what the consequence is, but you're leaving, all of this addresses the bullying and addresses the aggressor, but none of this policy talks about how you support the other child on the other end. What is the visible and tangible support you are giving that other child? And it needs to be more significant. The school needs to be accountable for the expectations that they set forth for themselves in the handbook. So if you set forth an expectation that you are going to deliver a report to a parent on an investigation, and you have a timeline of 7 days or 10 days, and you're 20+ days out, and you're like, we don't know when we're going to get that to you, because you are not accountable for your own handbook policy. So how do we hold you accountable for your end of the policy? I guess there's no accountability, because when you ask, it's like, oh, when we get to it, we get to it, I guess. Staff that aren't reporting it. So when children come to staff, and they either fail, I don't know whether it's because they're being lazy, I don't know because they don't know who to go to, but if you're not documenting the incident that is not yet bullying, but maybe it is the start because you have repeated patterns, that is what contributes to bullying. If you're not documenting it from the first time, by the time you do actually get to bullying, you're saying, well, there's no history in this child's file. We can't do any discipline. Well, that's the problem. You haven't documented it. You have to document the incident even when it doesn't meet the threshold of bullying, so that when it does meet the threshold of bullying, you can have a threshold. If your staff aren't taking the actions they need to do, then that's a problem. So the staff are accountable. And yeah, I think that's about everything. I don't know, did I cover it all? All right, I think I covered it. So yeah, there needs to be some real accountability. I think there's a lack of accountability on the school. There's lack of modeling from adults. There's lack of support for the children who are on the receiving end of the issues. And you might as well, maybe you want to loop your athletic policy into this whole bullying policy, because in that policy it says that this is a privilege, that being an athlete is a privilege. But just like Sarah said, there's a lot of double standards that are being doled out. So when you have a kid that is a star athlete, they become this double standard. They're untouchable. And that privilege doesn't seem to go away when that whole investigation happens. It's not even part of the disciplinary action. It's just like a good teaching practice, it's a good coaching practice, and yet that doesn't happen. So that double standard exists, and that needs to be addressed. So those kids who seem to be, oh, they're the good kid, or they have the good parent, or they're the star athlete, they're not being impacted the same way another child is. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around this. And the conversation doesn't need to end at the consequence for the bully. It needs to start about how you help the other child on the other end.
Hello, I also have a 7th grader at the Nichols Middle School, and one of her issues is the cafeteria. However, like Sarah had stated, Mrs. Tucker just arrived 7 weeks ago. Mrs. Lyons, it's her first year as well. This problem is not something that just started. It has happened for a long time. And if we stop and we look, the adults in these students' life, the longest is us as parents. So I do think it's time to listen to the call from Mrs. Tucker to the parents. I know that other schools have asked for volunteers during lunchtime to actually come in and see. I don't know if that's something that you'd be willing to do. I know that you came to the PTA meeting. You asked for the help. You spoke upon the incident. Maybe it is time, because some parents are blind to it, right? They're sitting at home at their dinner table, eating with a normal fork, not flinging food. Some of us could never imagine that our child would go to school to do it. So maybe it is time. I don't know the comfort level. I don't know what your thoughts are, but maybe that's something you can think of. You know, start opening it up for volunteers to come in. Sadly, I know you addressed it at the school committee, but out of our, 3,000 families, 10 show up. So maybe it's time to have a bigger voice to ask for our help.
That completes my report this evening.
It seems a lot of people are having different experiences depending on the different school or the individual incident of what the process is. Sometimes they're being asked to fill out a bullying incident report. Sometimes that's not there. Can you just quickly walk us through what is, until we get the new plan finished, what should a victim expect if they report bullying? What's the kind of the steps of protocol?
Yeah, well, it has to be reported to administration or any adults in the building, but I mean, ultimately, the building principals take lead, and an investigation will be conducted. Families and students will be contacted, interviewed, investigated. That's really the best way to describe it.
So should they all be given the incident report to create a record?
There doesn't need to be, it can be orally communicated. It just needs to be communicated. It doesn't have to take a specific form. It doesn't have to be emailed. It doesn't have to be in writing. The information just needs to get to the building principal. And principals weigh in if you feel differently, but I've talked with them all about that. And that's really the big ask. As long as they know, all 5 of them have made it crystal clear that they and their teams will be investigating and looking into every single indicator.
Okay.
One quick question. Regarding restorative practices, does the victim have any say in any of this? So are we reaching out to somebody that's reporting bullying and say we confirm that there's bullying? Are they having any saying if they feel like the punishment fits and so they feel safe, that they feel supported at school? Is there any, I know that there's things where you can't tell them, but for some kids, they have to see that this person faced consequences for their behaviors. And I think a lot of these kids are feeling like the bullies are not getting the consequences because they don't see any changes.
The answer is a little bit yes and no. Students are not a consultative body about discipline for another student. That will never happen. That said, the student who's been the target and their comfort is hugely important. So for example, one of the restorative practices might be to sit down and have like a mediated conversation. Not every scenario is good for that, and it always turns on if the student, if the target is saying, I wouldn't want to do that, you would never force that on a student. So they do have a say in what gets decided, particularly as it pertains to support for them. Students are usually pretty good about saying, that doesn't work for me, or that does work for me. But just to be clear, they aren't consulted about whether or not they think the punishment fits the crime.
Item on our agenda is MSBA, this high school building project. We had a meeting, just a couple things. It looks like everything will be finished in August. The main things that went on, essentially the biggest thing that went on was the reworking of the drainage in the soccer fields to make sure they met certain were much better, and they've been better, especially since the rain has come. We're still we have very few pieces left to finish, and some of them are going to be finished over the summer because the kids are out of school to finish some minor pieces here and there, but did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. And so, just a reminder to everybody, I've gotten most about the school subcommittee assignments. It's kind of late, and we're going to meet next week so we can do the MESC designate thing there. That's not a problem. Chair, entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Discussion, it's meeting minutes, warrants, and a donation from, it's a donation from Upper Pale Prince. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. The other action item we need to take is there's an out-of-state field trip to the Breakers. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the field trip.
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We will meet next Thursday to finish off the discussion about school choice. I would point out that our next meeting won't be the 8th. There's a building problem here and at Nichols. So we'll move, since we're doing an extra meeting this month, we'll do the final one of the 22nd in June. Take care of that way, okay?
Just double check, so we're going to meet on the 25th to continue with the agenda items from today, and then no meeting on the 8th.
Yeah, and we'll meet the 22nd, because I'll add a couple of other things that we have to next meeting, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you.
With that, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody.